I left New York City to go back to China, and people said I was crazy.
Let's start from the beginning. How did you end up in jail?
This white guy, who's Australian, left the phone store, got attacked by security, disarmed the security.
The phone that you have is your phone. You can unlock it.
Yeah, I willingly gave them my passcodes, and then from there, they seized it as evidence.
What did they do to you?
So the first thing they did to me was I was taken outside and stripped naked, left outside until I almost freeze to death. I was chained. Your hands are chained to your legs, so you're basically squashed up like a frog. I spent the best part of 4 months in 50-degree heat. On top of the torture that I received and the extrajudicial punishments that I received from the Chinese, and your health failing and not being able to speak to your family, not being able to pray, I had to deal with the Australian embassy on top of that. My father's a career public servant, and he was like, nah, that's a conspiracy theory. He just couldn't understand it. He was like, no, like the Australian government is fighting for your interests.
What a story. I would not have expected this in a Chinese prison. I would not have expected this from the Australian government. Imagine spending 5 years in a Chinese prison for simply taking your own phone back from a repair shop. That's exactly what happened to my guest today, Matthew. He was getting his phone back from his repair shop, and later he ends up in prison, no lawyer, getting beaten up, no embassy support as an Australian citizen, ends up being sentenced for 5 years in jail. And the people he meets there, the stories of what he goes through, of not being able to take his clothes off for shower, not being able to have any privacy, cameras everywhere, including the toilet, constant torture. It will give you an inside look into the Chinese prison system. And to say the least, it's very different to what we see in the West. The most shocking thing, though, is what the Australian embassy did. They supported Australians that were born in China, Chinese Australians, but completely neglected Australians born and bred in Australia. And apparently it's the same thing with other embassies, including the UK. The story is going to shock you. It's going to raise a lot of questions, and it will give you an inside look into the Chinese prison system. Enjoy. I'm excited for this conversation. You reminded me how important it is to first, not get into trouble, number one. And number two, not only that, is that just not to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I said to my girlfriend, I'm like, look, like the world is so terrifying after hearing your story. The world is so terrifying. I'm going to do all I can, knowing the right people. Luckily I have reach. Anything I could do to make sure I never have to go through what you went through. And and I can relate to it because I'm Australian as well. Number one. Number two, I've been to China. I did business in China. My first company was ecom. I would go to Guangzhou and Shenzhen over a decade ago, and I've spent time in China. So yeah, it hit me pretty hard, the story, and it was a bit of a
Thanks for
wake up call
reaching out,
for
man.
me.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I want the world to hear it as well. And lastly is another thing that intrigued me before we get into it is that I talk a lot about China, like others, about how advanced it's become, how progressive it is in many ways. But I think you showed a side of China that, to say the least, needs work.
I
But
mean, I left New York City to go back to China, and people said I was crazy, and I was like, no, you guys are crazy. Like, why are we living here in New York? There's so much opportunity in China. It's so convenient. And then, yeah, I was really shocked, man. I was really, and I was sad I was really saddened by it. I just couldn't believe it.
yeah, I'm glad you were able to write these notes in jail and prison so you can
Yeah.
share that story with the world. Let's go through the story. It all started, all of it is just surreal. It's hard to imagine from the beginning, how you got arrested, why you got arrested, all the way to the way they make you have showers with your clothes on, which is just, I think just some things just don't make sense. But
Yeah.
let's start from the beginning. What happened? How did you end up in jail?
Okay, so um pretty simple. I dropped my phone, and I had the iPhone 11, and this was in late December 2020. Sorry, 2019. I went to the phone store to this guy called Mr. Wei, and Mr. Wei's in the 258 phone market in Sanlitun, which is in central Beijing. And I've known Wei for a long time, and done a lot of like simple things, fix my iPad screen when I dropped it, like help me with my watch, get a new watch strap, simple things like that. So I went to Apple first because it was a brand new phone. So I was like, okay, I got to go to Apple first. And Apple were like 3,500 renminbi. And so I called Wei and I was like, hey, 3,500 renminbi for like an 8,900 renminbi phone seems pretty steep. Can you do it for cheaper? And he was like, yeah, bring it to the store. So I took it to the store. This is like 28th of December, 2019. I get to the store and he was like, yeah, simple, man. I'll call my guy. He'll get the screen and it'll take me a day or two. But, and I said, well, I need it by New Year's Eve. So he was like, yeah, it's no deal, no big deal. Let me call the screen guy. It shouldn't be anything more than like, say, 1,500 renminbi. And I was like, great. If it's going to be more than that, let me know because I'll just go to Apple and get the legit one done. And he was like, no, 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 you know me, you trust me, whatever. So I gave him my
And that
phone and
was
I was
all
reluctant.
you were speaking Mandarin to him?
I was speaking in English the way. Yeah. So um, I leave the phone there. I'm pretty apprehensive to leave it there, but I left it there and I'm thinking, okay, 24 hours without my phone. I've got another phone that I used for because I was selling clothes online, right? I was running an e-commerce business. So I had another phone that I was using to process all of that, my WeChat accounts and everything. So I'm not too stressed about it at that stage. And so then 2 days go by, 3 days go by. It's New Year's Eve. I'm calling Way, hey, I need my phone. I need my phone. I've got a DJ that I sponsor who's DJing at Space in Hebei for New Year's Eve. And I would really like to go there and be able to like rep my brand and like make content. Didn't answer my phone calls, didn't answer my phone calls. I got to like the 2nd of January and I'm like, I've got it. Like, I just got to go down there. I got to go to the store. So I called Way. I'm like, dude, where are you? I went to the store. And when I got to the store, from the minute I got there, he's like being shady, which was really out of character for Way. He's generally pretty straight up. So he was like, dude, there's a problem with the phone, but don't worry. Like, my guy here wants to buy the phone because it's the yellow one and he couldn't get it from the Apple store directly. So what we'll do is the phone screen actually turned out to be 3,500 rupees. Sorry, renminbi. So, but my guy wants to buy your phone. So he'll give you 1,000 and then you just give him the phone because he'll pay you 4,500 for the phone, but you owe me 3,500 for the repairs. And I was like, I was so angry. I was like, dude, I don't have time for this like weak finesse. Like, I need my phone. I've already waited 5 days. Like, I don't know what happened to you. You've always been pretty legit with me. So I took out 1,500 rupee renminbi and put it on the counter, grabbed the phone and bounced and didn't even think about. To me, it was just like the most natural thing. Like, okay, tried to finesse me. I've given you the money. We're clear. It couldn't have been 3,500. It must have been 1,500 because you quoted 1,500 in the first place. This is your business. You do this day in, day out. And it wasn't until I got 200 meters to the door that I felt this guy just grab me from behind and shove a can of pepper spray in my face, which I just managed to swat out of his hand. And then another security guard tried to attack me, and I managed to just throw the guy on the floor. And I'd already wrested the pepper spray from the other guy, so I sprayed him. He tried to electrocute me with a what they call dwembu, which is like a taser, basically like a cattle prod, not a taser that you see on the news when you see like the police shoot someone and there's a string that flies. It's just like a cattle prod. Um, and then the whole market descended into chaos. People were screaming. The other vendors were chasing me, and I was just fighting for my life. I tried to get outside. When I got outside, I got ran over by a scooter, and then I had a mob of people chasing me, and I just got engulfed by this mob. And I was thinking to myself at that point, I'm like one guy was sitting on top of me. I couldn't breathe, and I kept telling them like I can't breathe. Wabunam hushi, I can't breathe. Um, People were filming me, and they were saying Jin Cha, which is like police, right? So I was like, okay, the police are coming. Like, I'm so happy because I just got the shit kicked out of me by the mob, right? But I was so numb. It was so cold. It was January. So it was like, say -12, -13 outside, right? So then the police pulled me up and the police were super angry. They were abusing people in Mandarin, in Putonghua, asking like, why is this guy so beat up? Like, what happened? And everybody sort of scattered around. And then when the police took a look at me, they were like, what the fuck? Like, so they bundled me into the car. and they took me to Mazatian police station, which is obviously like the local police station. And when I got there, I'm already in handcuffs, right? At that point, and I'm like, I'm the aggrieved party here. Like, I basically, this guy's tried to rip me off. I've paid for the phone repairs. I've then had two security attack me with non-lethal weapons. I've had to fight for my life, defend myself from the security, and then try to make my way out of there. Almost got run over by a scooter, almost got, you know, um, crushed to death by the mob. And the police were just not having any of it. They were just like, no, you owe compensation to the phone store guy. You pepper sprayed this person. And slowly, obviously, word had gotten back to the phone market that, hey, the guy's at the Mazatian police station. So people started trickling in saying, this guy pepper sprayed me, this guy pepper sprayed me. And the police were basically trying to tell me, like, you can sort this out financially now, and which is pretty much in line with the way I had perceived China after living there for many years, and realizing that that was probably where this was going to go. But they'd already taken my phones away from me, so I wasn't allowed to contact anybody. And they basically started asking me for ludicrous amounts of money. Like, all in all, it was like Sambai Wu Sambai Wushawan renminbi, which is like 3.5 million renminbi, which is like, if you divide it by seven, you get pretty close in those days. So it's almost half a million US dollars. And they're saying, if you just give half a million US dollars now, I'm like, who on earth has $500,000 just laying around the house, or has the ability to just call someone and be like, hey, can you bring 3.5 million renminbi to the Mazatian police station? Because there's about 50 people here that each want 20, 30,000 renminbi compensation. So at that point, it was pretty much, I can't pay the compensation. I haven't done anything wrong in my eyes, right? I haven't robbed anybody. Um, we've just had a disagreement on the price, and your securities attacked me. But it was pretty clear to me at the police station that I was being charged with robbery, and that I violently resisted arrest, and that I basically had no rights. By the time I made it to the back room of that police station, and they had taken away all my phones and everything like that, and my passport. Um, yeah, it was made pretty clear to me that I was um, I was in a world of trouble. But they weren't specific that like you're being charged or anything like that. It was just like um, they just started kicking the shit out of me, to be honest, the police in that police station. And then I was transported to another police station, and
Holy
where I
shit.
stayed. Yeah,
The, so they started in after arresting you and after asking
yeah.
you for the money, they started kicking the shit out of you.
So they took me to this back room. They brought in some major crimes officers, and these major crimes guys had basically showed me a bunch of like pictures of apartments in Beijing, and they were saying like, "Do you recognize this apartment block? Have you been where have you been in the last couple of days? Have you been to this part of town? Do you know this?" And they were showing me a bunch of pictures of like apartment buildings, and I was like, "Dude, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Like, let's get back to the fact that like what am I being arrested for? Like I haven't robbed anybody. They're saying robbery, and I'm like, I haven't robbed anybody." So then the officers are asking me, and they showed a picture of a guy wearing like a black puffer jacket, and he didn't look Chinese. He looked like a foreigner. And they were basically asking me, "Is this you?" And I said, "No, that's 100% not me." And they themselves they made out that they realized that they didn't have the right person. Um, apparently,
But then why did they start
somebody
telling
had
you?
somebody had pepper sprayed somebody and robbed them, and that person had died from like an asthma attack, which was later explained to me. But then I wasn't that person that they were looking for. So the
But then why would they beat you up?
major crimes unit came to investigate whether I was the person, that I was the pepper spray murderer. And when they realized that I wasn't, they turned me back to the local Mazatian police and said basically like, we don't have any business with this guy. And then one woman, say 25-year-old police officer who spoke really good English, she was telling me like, this is a big problem for you, you know, this is China, this is not Australia, you know, we have very strict laws against robbery and ownership of property. And I think you're in a world of trouble you don't realize. And I was trying to explain to her like, it's my phone. I haven't robbed anybody. We had a disagreement on price. I paid the original price. And at that point, she was like, "Yeah, I don't really care. You know, it's not my job to care." And she gave me into the custody of these three or four male officers, and they were the ones that started abusing me, um, and telling me that like because of Australia is the worst enemy of China at the moment, and then from there, I just started to kick the shit out of me, man.
Enemy. I'm originally from Australia, and a lot of Chinese people in
Yeah,
Australia. I thought Australia and China had a really good relationship. Um,
yeah.
I want to take one more step back. Is what were you doing in China? You said you were sponsoring a DJ for your brand. What was the
Yeah,
business that you had there, and how
I
long have you
was
spent
making
there?
I lived in China on and off for 6 years. I worked for Four Seasons Hotel Group, and I also worked for some independent restaurants, as a general manager and events manager. And then I came back to China and then decided to open up, like a streetwear label. And so I was the founder, and I was operating my streetwear label, and then yeah, that all came crashing down, when I got arrested in January 2020. To be
I would have
honest,
been.
like I don't follow Australian politics, right? I left Australia in the early 2000s. So it was an eye opener to me as well. I was like, I always thought that China and Australia were friends. Like we got a huge trade partnership. Me, myself, personally, I don't have any problem with the Chinese, but they were telling me, no, no, like you don't understand. Like it's a big problem, like Morrison's policies. And I was like, fuck, does that have to do with me, man? I'm just a guy. Like I work here. I employ people. I'm not like an Australian politician. I'm not involved in foreign policy. But I later realized that that's just a very common theme in China. The Chinese are they're not like most societies, right? Most societies, are amalgamation of a bunch of different people with interests in religions and goals in life, and are moving towards, separate and independent goals. The Chinese are a homogenous society, right? Even though there's say 57, um, other indigenous groups, 99% of the population is Han Chinese. They're under one party political system, and they consider that they're moving forward, right? Like as a collective. That's what socialism is. So the Chinese get deeply offended by things like that. And I later found this out after spending 41,000 hours incarcerated, surrounded by Chinese, that, um, yeah, if somebody misrepresents China in an advertisement, then the entire netizens of China are in uproar, and the Chinese people take these things very personally, and, especially at the lower levels of society, they're not able to separate, what the Renminbi or what the CCTV tells them from reality. So, um, it was literally the worst time in history to be, arrested in China as an Australian.
I would have also been under the impression, as a fellow Australian, that I would at least have a sense of security, even though it could be a false sense of security. Like I'm Australian, my embassy's there, they were going to treat me well. They don't want to ruin or have any issues with Chinese Australian relations just because of one person allegedly robbing their own phone. But
Yeah.
it seems that the complete opposite happened. Instead of them treating you well and being more careful as you're a foreigner,
Mm.
um, they treated you worse. And I'm going to read out a quote that you said. You said the following: I was in really bad shape when I first arrived. They beat me for 2 days straight. That's when you were initially in custody at the
Yeah.
police station I was in. And I haven't slept or eaten or had water for 48 hours. And
Yeah.
then I was given a big sack of documents to sign. Maybe tell us about the next, what happened next.
So, probably one of the, like, up to that point, one of the scariest moments of my life. They took me to this processing center, and, this is after kicking the living shit out of me, right? For the best part of 48 hours. I went to this other processing center, and, I got stripped naked behind a curtain, and they basically took all my clothes and dumped them into a bucket, and then wrote my name on the bucket, and, they gave me these threadbare pajamas. And I'll never forget to this day. It's like it's etched into my memory. I walk past it, and on the left hand side, right, I'm in handcuffs, and the officer's holding my head, pushing it down. I look up, there's a huge glass enclosed room, and there's two women sitting there, and one woman screaming obscenities in Spanish, and there's another African woman, um, and she just looks resigned to her fate. And in huge letters on the glass is HIV. And then next to it is another room, huge, again, glass, and it has all of these seats. in a square, and each seat has a number on it, and it doesn't have a back. It's just like an armrest. So, and their people are sitting there, and they've all got hoods on their head. And I remember looking over and saying, like, what the fuck? This is weird, man. Why those two girls are there with HIV, and why all these people are here with hoods on their head? And I later found out because I was thrown into that room, right? I would have sat in that room for maybe 18, 20 hours. And they kept giving me little cups of water and telling me that I need to do a drugs test, right? And I'd already failed a drugs test at the first police station because they gave me a cup that was already open and already had all the lines already marked on it. And they were like, you need to pee in this. And I was like, but it's already open. And they were like, just pee, just pee. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just pee. So I peed in that. And then they're like, oh, yeah, you're guilty for drugs. So that's 21 days automatically. They can detain you, right? For possession of drugs or for taking drugs in China. So then they're feeding me these little cups of water and telling me I need to do another drugs test at that processing center. And by that stage, I was so badly beaten, I just fell asleep. And one other guy kept nudging me, and I kept waking up. And then I just kept falling asleep. I later realized that those two girls didn't have HIV. They just have a separate area to put the girls. So those girls were in the female section, and I was in the male section. And it wasn't until I swear I was there for maybe a day and a half, they called out like my number, Sanchez, which was 34. And I was taken to another room, and they did like they took some blood, and then um they gave me some paperwork to sign about my medical records. And then they tried to drag me like down a staircase. And so and it was freezing outside. January 2020 was like -13, -15. And at this stage, it must be like 4 or 5 in the morning. I lost track of time because there was no windows or anything, no clocks in that glass like what do you call it? Like that glass area, right? That waiting room. So they dragged me down about 3 stairs into the basement, and it was all brick. And at the end of the corridor, there was like a scoreboard, and it had like names and then numbers next to it. And I later realized it was like the room and the Chinese name, right? Um, and then when I looked in those rooms, people were like strapped to a chair, like strapped around here. And I literally, like, the first thing I thought was like, holy shit, like that's the electric chair. Like they're executing people here. Like, and people were screaming, and I was like, I was totally out of it though. I had severe concussion. Um, and then they strapped me in that tiger chair. And then they brought out one guy, and I'll never forget because he was kind of handsome. And I don't know if that was just my concussion and I was hallucinating, or if he was actually, but he looked like some sort of like Korean movie star. And he came out and he was like, you're in so much trouble. And he was asking me some questions about my passport. And then he basically was like, why did you rob that guy? And I was like, dude, take a look at my phone. Like, look at my Alipay balance. Like, do you think I would wake up in the morning and like just decide to go and rob? So I was like, I'm a foreigner, man. I don't speak Chinese. At this stage, I didn't speak Chinese, certainly didn't read or write Chinese. I was like, where the hell would I get pepper spray from, man? I got no idea what you guys are talking about. I didn't rob anybody. It's my fucking phone. I started to get really angry with that guy. And he was like, look, like, you don't understand. Like, this is China. Robbery is a huge crime. Um, but like, I think I can help you, but you need to go take a medical. And it's at this point they started talking about medical, medical, medical. So I was like, okay, that's different than what the woman at the first police station said. She was like, oh, 10 years minimum, you're fucked. Like, there's no way for you. China is so hard on robbers, and especially being Australian. But then when I got to the second police station, when I calmed down and realized I'm not being electrocuted, I spoke to this guy, and he was pretty chill. And he was like, yeah, you go do your medical. I later realized that's just the way they get you to calm down, right? Because they're just about to put you into the detention center. So they drove me, and I was squished between two security guards. And I'll never forget because I was lying to myself. I was like, yeah, it's going to be fine. And I think that's a very natural thing to do in hindsight, right? Everybody, if you haven't been through what I've just come out of, you tend to view the world and say, no, that it's generally a fair world. And if you know in your heart that you haven't done anything wrong, you will get your day in court, and you'll be able to tell someone, hey, look, I know you're the senior officer here. Just hear me out. It's my phone. Check my phone. So I was busy, lying to myself that everything would be okay, and that maybe I am gonna go get a medical, you know? And so then we started driving south of the city, and I knew Beijing well enough, and I was like, okay, there's a brand new airport in Daxing. I'm probably, and then when I see the signs that we're going to Daxing, I'm like, ah, man, these guys are just putting me like on a flight back to Australia. I'm just being deported. Um, and then they kind of did a couple turns off, and then the officer started pulling my neck down in the car, so I couldn't see out the window, but I could just see this unmistakable, very manicured lawn and this very like tall white fence with the barbed wire. And I was like, oh, okay, we're not going to the airport where looks like I'm gonna go to prison. And even throughout that whole process, they took me to a police station that was right outside the front gate of the number 3 detention center. And they were like, no, you're not going to prison. It's just a medical. And they kept lying to me. And then I stayed in that car for another 7 hours. It was pitch black by the time they dragged me out of that car. They forced me to sign a bunch of documents. And then they were like, go over there. And yeah, this PLA soldier basically grabbed me and took me inside. And I'll never forget because you have to squat on top of this like glass dance floor. It looks like the dance floor from Saturday Night Fever. You got to squat on top of that, and then they shine these bright lights, and at that point, you just like you're shocked to your soul, to your core, and you're like, holy shit, man. Um, I never thought I would see the day that I would be in prison, especially not a Chinese prison for something so
I'm
random.
just, I'm really, really confused. When you keep telling them, "Hey, this is my phone,"
Yeah.
has anyone said like, "Hold on, how? If that's your phone, then what did you steal?" Did
No,
anyone ask? Like,
no. Throughout, man, the entire 5 years of my incarceration, nobody ever asked me, hey, like, even when I got to prison, no one ever asked me, like, dude, why did you come to China to steal a phone? Are you crazy? And it's like, it was never, it was as soon as I was arrested, it was like, you stole the phone. That's the narrative. There's no other story. And I was like, I need a lawyer. I need
Where's
to
the
speak to
phone?
my
But
embassy.
where is the phone you stole? The phone that you have is your phone. You can unlock it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I actually, the crazy thing was, like, when the in that first police station when they took me to the back room and the major crimes guys were there, I actually gave them my phones because I had both of the phones. I had the iPhone 11, the yellow iPhone 11, and I had this like old iPhone 6. And I gave it to them. I willingly gave them my passcodes, right? And then from there, they seized it as evidence. So even when I got like later when I got to the detention center, and they were like, "Do you have any money?" And I was like, Man, I my wallet is gone. I don't know where any of my belongings are. Like I haven't eaten or slept for 3 days. I've had the literal shit kicked out of me. Like I've got broken ribs at this stage. I can hardly even talk. Like I can hardly even breathe properly. Um, and I've asked them like, if I need money, like, where's my phone? Let me call somebody so that I can bring money here, or let me use my wallet. I can go to the ATM and take out money. And they were like, no, it's seized. It's now evidence in your case. But there was never any question of like, can you prove that it's your phone? Can we look at your WeChat conversation with the phone store guy? Can we like ascertain what actually happened here on this day? No, never came into
Why?
the picture.
Why do you think that is?
I've had like almost 60 months to think about that. And after, and this probably seems crazy to someone like yourself who's lived in China and worked in China, has Chinese friends, right? Like the Chinese don't like foreigners, man. They really don't like foreigners. And I think it was a really bad time for the Chinese, specifically with the Australian government hammering the Chinese. Scott Morrison's policies were super anti-Chinese. They were in the middle of the whole Uyghur forced labor and all of that issue, and it came down on me like a ton of bricks, man. But more so than that, I think there was a little bit of egg on their face. Like the major crimes police, they actually asked the woman, like, why is the security at the phone market carrying pepper spray? And she was like, well, what would you know? Like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah. So I think along the way, it got high enough where someone was like, this white guy who's Australian left the phone store, got attacked by security, disarmed the security, and then like, how do we go from here? You know, like there was no, there's such a loss of face to the Chinese. Like he disarmed the security guards. Why? What happened? Oh, apparently the phone repair guy tried to finesse him. Yeah, but you can't just pepper spray Chinese people in China. This is Beijing, you know. So I think it struck a nerve with them, but it was off the table. It was already decided from day one. And I saw a lot of that when I got to the detention center. I saw that with so many other people. It's like one guy jumped the fence of his university and got attacked by someone in plain clothes, and he had no idea that that's the security guard for the university, because he's not wearing anything to let you know, to inform you that he's a security guard. So the guy attacked the guy who grabbed him, and they later gave him 6 years for assault. But that was already decided from the first time the police report was made. The security guard attacked the student, and the student fought back. And they're like, no, no, that's not what happened. And that's a common thread with 99.9% of the cases that I later went on to see in my 500 days in the detention center, was that there's a material fact that's given by the prosecutor's office that's first cooked up by the police on the scene, and then everything else has to fall into that narrative. Otherwise, it's considered to be not cooperating with the material facts. And yeah, there's no such thing as evidence
Holy
or,
shit.
you know.
What about calling a lawyer?
So, funnily enough, any Westerner that's, watched plenty of TV, the first thing you do before you get arrested is, I'm not saying anything. I want to speak to my lawyer. And especially being a foreigner, you're like, I want to speak to the embassy so that the embassy can, you know, maybe contact the foreign ministry. I hadn't even got that far, but I just knew that, like, as an Australian citizen being arrested in China, I needed to speak to my embassy and I needed to speak to a lawyer. And repeatedly, I was told, this is not the time. You don't need a lawyer now. All you need to do is keep your mouth shut and just cooperate. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need a lawyer until you go to trial. And I was like, I definitely need a lawyer. I need legal representation. I need someone to be representing me now. I shouldn't be signing anything. I shouldn't be talking to anybody. And the Chinese, they just did not. I was just told to shut the fuck up, basically, at every turn. And it wasn't until I was in the detention center, 7th of January, and the Australian embassy came. And I was like, I need a lawyer. Like, I have family outside. Like, I need you guys to help me contact my people. And the Australian embassy, um, who can only be described as like a few sandwiches short of a picnic, right? Like the way they behaved. Like the guy, I only have 30 minutes with them. And the guy, Stuart, my first point of contact, when he came to the window, you have to imagine I'm beat to shreds, right? And I'm oblivious to my surroundings. And he spent the entire meeting telling me that, hey, you know, I've been posted in China now for 4 years. I'm so stoked, man. I'm going home, so you won't be dealing with me moving forward. Like, we'll probably come and visit you monthly, but don't, like, it won't be me because I'm going home. So I just can't wait to be home. I've been here for so long and I'm just really looking forward to it. And I was like, is this guy, like, I wish someone had filmed it. I was like, is this guy joking? Like, um, and then the local fixer, who's Chinese, she's not a Australian citizen. Um, she gave me a A4 piece of paper. She like held it up, like here you go. This is a lawyer list, and this has got all the names of all the lawyers in China. So we'll give you this piece of paper, and then you'll give it to your family, and your family will hire you a lawyer. And so, I mean, this is how ridiculous that is, right? Those same consular staff have been dealing with Chinese people. Even when I went to the prison, there's Australian Chinese guys that have been in that prison since 2006. So that means that at the very least, the Australian consul has been dealing with people who are Australian citizens in that exact same detention center and prison for 15 years. And they tried to give me the A4 piece of paper. They gave it to the police, and the police were like, you can't take that into the room. And the police officer threw it in the bin. So I go back to the room and I'm like, how am I supposed to call my family? How am I supposed to like get hold of a lawyer when I'm the one that's in the detention center? And I don't have any access to any phone. I don't have any access to anybody. The only access I have is to the embassy.
What has the embassy done to help you? So when you had that meeting for 30 minutes, they gave you a piece of paper.
Yeah.
What else did they do? Did they call your
They
family?
get
Did they?
no, I tried to communicate over to them, like, hey, get in contact with my people. And this is what started an absolute like 5 years of just what can only be described as criminal negligence from the Australian embassy on my part. And a lot of people have like hammered me in the YouTube comments. They're like, why would you go and commit a crime and expect the Australian government to save you? But that's just people being ignorant to the fact that the Australian consular charter that they have in agreement with the Foreign Ministry of China means that when you're arrested as an Australian in China, you're not allowed to communicate with the outside world on your own. You're not allowed to conduct your business affairs. It's not like they give you a phone and you got like a mug full of quarters and you're like ringing your girlfriend, hey, I need you to go and pack up my apartment. And then you're ringing your business manager, hey man, I need you to sell all the shares and then pack up the warehouse and send my stuff on the slow boat to Australia. It doesn't happen. The only way you contact the outside world is through the embassy. And that was torturous because the Australian embassy in Beijing is not even run by Australians. It's run by Chinese. It's run by Chinese nationals. If you call the consular, it's a Chinese person that answers. When they come to visit you, it's always a Chinese local fixer and a rotating door of Australian consular staff who have no say in anything. So my life would have been way easier if I'd just been able to communicate with the outside world. If I'd just been able to have access to a phone and just been able to call my housemate and say, hey, I'm in prison. I need you to pay the staff. I need you to liquidate this, that. But I wasn't able to do anything without the Australian embassy.
So your family had no idea where you were all these days?
No, so 7th of January, I saw the embassy. And then 15th of January, the police opened the door and they were like, hey, there's a virus outside. It's killing a lot of people. And so the prison system is on lockdown. No one's going to court. No one's meeting the prosecutor. There's no shopping. There's no embassy visit. No anything. Just wait. And that was Jan 15th. And one officer came to me and he was like Biejoji, which is like no rush. He's like Biejoji, like next month everything will be okay. And I was like, okay. August, I got a pamphlet faxed to me by the Australian embassy. So that's 8 months since their last visit. And it asked me stupid questions
Jesus
like,
Christ.
how's your welfare? How's your health? Do you need money? Uh, is there anything we can do for you? Like this generic on DFAT letterhead. And I was just mortified. Like by that stage, right? I've already been tortured for 8 months. I've been coerced into signing a confession. Um, I've lived for, 300 days with no money, no toothbrush, no toilet paper, no
They
soap to
made so
wash your body.
hold on. When you said coerced to sign a confession, these are the papers they made you sign when you arrived to the detention center?
No, I mean, once I was in the detention center, I refused to accept my crime. And so one thing in the Western world, right? Like if you commit a crime or the police suspect that you've committed a crime, they build their case. They say, okay, Mario, we know Mario is doing this. So they monitor you and they investigate you, they build a case. And then when they have enough overwhelming evidence that they know they can take to a judge, they come and arrest Mario. And then they're like, Mario, this is the case that we have, this is the evidence, and we're going to take you to court. How do you plead? And you get your lawyer and your lawyer will say, well, I've seen the evidence and it's really overwhelming and you better take the plea, or you take it to trial, right? And then you get bail and bail's granted and then you go about your way until your trial date. In China, what they do is they arrest you and then you are arbitrarily detained. Like you go through summary detention whilst they build your case. And then if that takes 4 or 5 years to bring you to court, then that's the process. And then when you finally get to court, that's when you face the music, basically, is when you
That
you
is
reach your
insane.
verdict. But in that process, there was never any mention. And I was in that detention center for 504 days. I saw so many cases. I
How
saw
was it like?
it was torturous, man. There's no other way to describe it. I was physically being tortured by the officers because I just refused to accept the facts. I was like, I haven't robbed anybody. I'm not a robber. I fucking own my own business in China. I have been here for so many years. Why would I blow it all? Why would I throw it all away? I have a wholly owned foreign enterprise. Like I've got 1 million renminbi in registered capital. Why would I throw it all away? To rob my own phone. It's insane. So I refused to sign. And the police were telling me, listen, like, in the West, right? You get a fancy lawyer and then you bribe your money or whatever, and then you get set free. And they're like, in China, what happens is if you don't cooperate, you will get a bigger sentence. If you don't agree with the material facts, you get a bigger sentence. If you don't confess ASAP, you get a longer sentence. So through that whole period, I was like, no, this is bullshit. And this is in the middle of COVID, right? So there's no contact with the outside world. There's no lawyers. And they're asking me just to sign this confession. Just sign this confession. Everything will be fine. We know you robbed. Um, and it got to the point of physically torturing me. And that was the first time in my life I've ever been. A lot of people say, like, oh, I was so tortured, but I was literally tortured into a confession. And it took me 8 months before I finally realized that, yeah, you can only fight it so far before you start to do the maths and you're like, what if these guys are true? Like, there's other guys in this room that have been here since 2017. They've been here since 2016. It's now 2020.
How
So
did they
I
torture you?
signed.
What did they do to you?
So the first thing they did to me was I was taken outside and stripped naked. And this is in January, right? So it's like -12, -13. And I was handcuffed to at my waist height. I was handcuffed to the wall, stripped naked, left outside until I almost freeze to death, then brought inside, allowed to warm up, put my clothes back on, stay inside for, say, 25 minutes, and then be taken outside again, stripped naked, froze again, brought inside, froze again.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, so it was pretty primal, right? They're using Mother Nature to torture you. They don't even have to put their hands on you. So that was 48 hours, 2 days solid of being stripped naked, almost falling into a coma, and then being taken inside and being allowed to warm up. So I was fucking tortured by that stage. That didn't work. So I was chained. And then, if anybody's ever been handcuffed before, you're still pretty mobile. So you're chained and then your hands are chained to your legs. So you're basically squashed up like a frog, and was left in that position for, I want to say, 5, 6 days. And then that didn't work. And I was left in a room where they were playing the static. Have you ever, like when you hear static on a microphone, when you point a microphone at a speaker, like, like that noise? I was left in that room for probably 10 days, day and night, with just static playing 24/7.
And this is
Um,
this is the shit you see in the movie Zero Dark 30, what they do to terrorists while they're
yeah,
questioning them. And even then, that was a lot of people were up in arms. How can you treat people like that, even though they're terrorists, even though they're trying to get information to avoid a terrorist attack? You can't treat
yeah,
people like that.
of
Um,
course. I'm
you
well aware of
you
that, man.
and you were treated like that without seeing a lawyer.
Yeah,
Um, you haven't been to court yet, and
nothing.
the allegations that you stole something, yet it was just
Yeah.
your phone.
Exactly. And even
That
at
is
even at the end of
wild.
the day, even if I did steal a phone, right? And which I didn't, but I'm just saying, like, for an 8,000 renminbi phone, I'm pretty sure, like, the punishment, even by Chinese standards, is not to be hung upside down or frozen or starved or tortured or yeah. But
Were
I
others
mean,
were others going through similar things in that detention center? Did you meet many
yeah, for
people there?
sure. It's the common thread. But so a lot of guys just bite the bullet, especially a lot of drug cases, right? Like, it's not so. It's pretty obvious. Like, the drugs were in your stomach. There's not a whole lot of like, wasn't me. No, I'll fight it. I'll never confess. But there was plenty of other people like myself. Like mine is robbery and you know uh, violently resisting arrest. Other guys is rape because a KTV girl says he raped me. There's no evidence. The KTV girl has given a written statement saying he didn't rape me. I was just trying to, extract money from him. And the judge has still given them 5 years or 8 years for rape. There's the common thread in the Chinese legal system is they don't build a case based on evidence. They don't resort to DNA evidence. There's no such thing as due diligence or due process. What they do is they arrest you. Once they arrest you, they isolate you from your people. They isolate you from your culture, from your religion. They isolate you from your language. They hold you in a detention center, and they play the long game. They're like, listen, dude, like, the minimum for you is, say, six years for robbery. But the fact that you haven't confessed means that you're fighting it, man. You're not cooperating. So cooperating in China is a big deal. The day that you accept your crime and you say, yeah, I'm guilty, I accept my crime, then they'll bring out a leniency agreement. You'll sign the leniency agreement, and then you'll go to court. Everything will run very, very smoothly from there. But if you continue to fight the material facts of the case, then you may stay here indefinitely. You may be here for 5 years, 7 years. They were like, it's up to you, you know. Um, and loads of people, I would say 99% of people in the Chinese legal system are forced into a confession. And then it's very simple for the police. It's very simple for the prosecutor. All they do is they're like, see, confession. So whatever we do to this fucking guy is valid because he came to China and he confessed to committing a crime. So there's no need for police work at that point. They just hold up your confession. They're like, you came here, you robbed someone, therefore, bam, that's your sentence. There's no question of like, well, does the sentence really match the crime? Nothing like that. It's just, and that's the entire Chinese legal system is like that. Once you've been
For
arrested, you're
foreigners,
isolated.
for
For
foreigners and
Chinese,
for
it's even,
Chinese.
excuse me. For
That's
Chinese, it's
fine.
even worse. It's exactly the same. It's isolation from your people and then forced into confession. There's never any like overwhelming amount of evidence that they built. If they find three people in a room full of heroin, it's your heroin. It's not like the guys before us left the heroin there. No, it's just three guys are in a room with heroin. It's your heroin. And then you're going to stay in that detention for 5 years until you finally realize that,
Oh.
yeah, once you sign that piece of paper, then they're like, see, it was your heroin, finished. And then you go to court. So, yeah, and I fought it really hard, Mario. And I believed that um, I hadn't done anything wrong, really. And so I'm pretty stubborn. And I was just really able to be able to separate myself, my mental state from my physical state, and just be like, no matter what these guys throw at me, I'm not guilty. Like, I'm not going to sign that piece of paper because they might turn around and be like 15 years once you sign it, right? I wasn't buying this whole thing of like leniency agreement, leniency agreement. But then I physically saw with my own eyes another case where they offered someone a leniency agreement and they tortured that guy, and then that guy signed the paperwork and he got a reduced sentence. So after 8 months, um, I just got tired, man. I was just so tired. I'd been starved, I'd been electrocuted, I'd been frozen, I'd been um, chained, and I was no longer recognizable to myself. And I just decided, like, if I sign this piece of paper, maybe I can go to prison and use a phone, and you know, maybe I can just get out of this room, this 2.6 by 5 meter room with 30 people, with no
You
windows
were
and the lights on 24/7.
fucking hell. What type of
Yeah.
people were in the detention center?
It's a mixed bunch, but mainly like most the police manage the demographics pretty well, right? So you have there's one tribe of people in Nigeria. They're the Igbo tribe, and they're Christian, and they're lovely people, but they have been fighting for the independence of their country, Biafra, for many, many years, and they have not been successful. And in doing that, most of them have like being forced to become very entrepreneurial, right? So most of the drug trade, a lot of the sex trade, a lot of fraud comes out of the Igbo community because they're marginalized in Nigeria. So, for example, like the majority of the street dealers in China who are not Chinese are Nigerian. So there was plenty of Nigerians, um, especially Igbo Nigerians, who were in the detention center. Then there was loads of Mongolians, right? Because Mongolians are visa free. The Mongolian economy's in the toilet. So there was loads of pickpockets that were Mongolian and loads of guys that just got picked up for fighting, right? And then there was a smattering of people from OECD countries, like a couple American, one American got caught with like a gun at the airport, a few Americans for drugs, one
Intentional or accidentally?
accidentally. They said that he's packed the gun by mistake, which I just found hilarious, right? But he was a great guy. He's a Dominican American, and God bless him. I haven't seen him since I got out, but I hope he's okay wherever he is.
How
But
how
uh,
how long did
and
he?
probably
Sorry,
had a
sorry. Just
case
let me get.
against TSA.
How long
3 years
did he
only.
spend
3 years, yeah.
for
Originally
having
they
a gun
started off
by
with
accident?
7. Yeah. So he had a gun at the turnstiles of the Beijing airport, and it was loaded with like 15 in the clip and one in the chamber. So he could have just pulled it out and pop, 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 started shooting people. Um, but he worked for a big company that's involved in the semiconductor business in China. And they allowed him to continue his business trip and then come back to Beijing. And then they arrested him. And they originally offered him 7 years. And I think at some point the American ambassador got involved because he was working in such a sensitive industry. He was an engineer for a big um, East Coast chip manufacturer. So he was very lucky to get 3 years. But there was a smattering of those kind of Westerners, and then there was loads of Chinese with foreign paperwork. And because Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei CFO, she was arrested and she was on house arrest. So there was loads of Canadians, Canadian Chinese, that had been kind of. And again, you wouldn't believe that, right? You'd be like, just because the Huawei CFO is being detained in Canada, why would the Chinese are not so petty that they would just arrest random Canadians? You're like, no, they are. They're that petty. The place was chock-a-block with random Canadians that had just been arrested for no reason. And then local Chinese, right? So,
As in
and
literally, sorry, literally no reason or false charges, or
I
how
would
did it
say
work
false
for them?
charges. Yeah, exactly. Just people that like one guy was there because he was caught with like some vapes that didn't have duty paid on them or something like that. And they were trying to say that he was like some underground tobacco kingpin, and they ended up giving him like 15 years. But it was
What
all
the
bullshit.
fuck?
Yeah, it was just his driver like got some vapes online from somewhere. But yeah, they just rounded up a bunch of Canadians. More so than that, they took the Americans that they had, right? And this was, I felt for these guys, man, because at that stage you got no contact with the outside world, right? And you've been in this place for COVID is just completely, all of us are just like covered in a poverty of dignity because of COVID, right? And we're all just desperate. So the police take these Americans and they're like, listen here, fuckface, if Meng Wanzhou gets extradited to the USA, we're giving you motherfuckers the death penalty. And these American, like one's there for like 7 years, another's there for like 15 years. They're like, the death penalty for what? They're like, just you wait and see. If Meng Wanzhou, they're the officers like, mark my words. If Meng Wanzhou is extradited to the USA, we're going to execute you three. And so those guys, like, can you imagine living with that on your head? And what the Chinese always used to say to us in the detention center, they're like, nobody cares about you. Your embassy, when did your embassy come? The Ugandan embassy came to visit people from Uganda, but the Australian embassy didn't come to visit you. They're using COVID as an excuse. No one cares about you. We can kill you right now and give 20,000 renminbi to your embassy. They will tell your family that you died of a heart attack. We'll cremate your body and send it back to Australia. No one gives a fuck, Danny. I, and I don't, after being in that place for 504 days, they're not joking, you know. Certainly the Chinese people in the Australian embassy, they don't care about you at all. They only have Chinese interests at heart. They don't care if you die. They'll definitely take the 20,000 RMB.
You remind me of two stories. So I haven't spent that much time in China. I think I spent in total maybe 3 months, 4 months in total through
Yeah,
many trips for business. I remember once I was in a first one about the gun. That's why I kind of stuck on the American guy with the gun by accident. I remember,
yeah,
I don't know if we'll crop this out of the interview, but I was going from a country to China. I was much younger,
yeah,
well over a decade ago, and I had a taser in that other country for self
yeah,
defense. And
yeah,
in the airport, I think I was I was heading to China from that country. In the
yeah,
airport, after I go through security, I'm getting something from the bag. I'm like, oh shit, it's a taser, and I throw it out. I'm like, oh, thank God I found it. So I was thinking now
yeah.
after what you're telling me, like if I arrived with China and that taser, and they were in a bad mood, far
I'm
out.
telling you, bro, you're only by the grace of God.
Another story I was in. I also remembered it while you're speaking. I danced bachata, and I was in a club dancing bachata, and outside I saw two girls just get knocked out by someone. So I ran outside. No one stopped them. As you said, the
Yeah,
society, they're all very monolithic society. They either all do something, like they all rallied
yeah,
against you, or they all
of
decide to
course.
stand back. That's at least my experience. The girls
Yeah.
got knocked out. No one stood in their way. I ran. They tried to stop them. They ended
Mm,
stopping them. The girl got up, and then I went back to dance, and I saw them get knocked up again. The police came, but then
mm,
in the West, we have the police immediately arrested people that were kicking them, punching them, and then
of
help the people
course.
that are on the floor knocked out. It
Yeah.
just seemed that they didn't really care. They wanted things to end. They didn't really care what's right, what's wrong. What I
Yeah.
noticed is that they wanted the easiest track to kind of end this thing and move on to
Mm.
the next thing. Maybe because it's such
Yeah.
a big population, maybe it's their mentality. But I was starting to remember that story as you were telling me your story, because with you,
Yeah.
they made up their mind and they just wanted to get it over and done with you and move on to the next thing. And then you ended up spending years in jail.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know what else to add on top of that, but yeah, like they pretty much decide on the day that you get arrested what your fate will be, and then they just put you in a detention center, which is hell, man. I'm telling you, like so many guys when I finally got to prison had contracted hepatitis C or tuberculosis from the detention center. When I was in the detention center, they brought around the COVID vaccine, and they tried to inject us all with the same needle, and I'm like, dude. Like, I'm sorry, but like, I will die. You'll have to kill me before you inject 30 other people with the same syringe and put it in my arm. And I saw other people that were just so resigned to their fate, like especially the Chinese. The Chinese don't argue anything. They just like authority, authority. Anybody tells me to do something and I've got to do it because I got to fall in line. Whereas foreigners are like, no way, but I just couldn't believe it. Like the things that will happen to you, like the judicial punishments that will happen to you if you ever spend time in a Chinese detention center is wild. Like even if you're there for 4 months, you're going to go home and you've contracted HIV, hepatitis C, tuberculosis, or something. And that's your best case scenario. If you haven't lost a bunch of teeth, or you know, some crazed Mongolian, or somebody hasn't like caved your head in. Um, yeah, it's really it's about as worse a place as you can ever live.
I got one more question about the detention center. So just to kind of go through the story, you were minding your own business in China days
Mm,
before New Year's Eve. You put your phone for repair.
yeah.
You went take your phone back, got in a
Yeah.
spat with the guy, got attacked by security. Next thing you know,
Mm.
you're in detention center being beaten up, treated horribly, and spent 8 months there with no support, no legal support, no speaking to your family. Um, and then you go to prison. Is it in the detention center or in prison you met that guy that was pretending to be Jesus?
Oh man. So I spent a lot more than 8 months in the detention in total. I signed my confession after the eighth month. Then on November, I went to court on a phone because of coronavirus. So they literally just wheeled out a little mobile phone and they WeChat video called 4 years of my life away. And at that point, on the 24th of November, was the first time I'd spoken to my embassy since 7th of January. And they were all like, "Hi, we apologize. Sorry, COVID. Give me a long story. Anyway, we've got a message from your housemate." And I was like, I just can't with you people at the moment. Because at that stage, like they'd already offered money to the Chinese Australian guy that was in the same room as me when they saw him in January. And I was like, nobody ever offered me. Is that Australian government policy that we only offer money to Chinese born Australians when they're in the detention center? I don't think that's really the government's policy. But um, so I then got my sentence on the 25th of November. And it wasn't until the following May 2021 that I was transferred to prison. So I actually spent a total of 504
Right.
days
So
in
can
the
you,
detention center.
before going to prison, then,
Yeah.
so can you tell me more about the hearing that you went through? So when you had your
Yeah.
time in
So,
court, that's the time, because I'm sure the whole time you're waiting for your time in court. This is the time you're gonna tell them exactly what
yeah.
happened. You're gonna finally get out.
Yeah,
How was that
of
like?
course. And so because when you're in the vacuum, right, of the detention center, the door's closed. If the door opens, the police ask for something or they say something, and then the door closes again. And like you just live by the opening of that door. And then anything else is just your day to day. You're just trying to stay alive, right? And so there's no information. There's no like tomorrow you're going to court, Mario. It's nothing. It's just the door opens and it's like, you come. You're going to court now. And you're like, oh, I'm going to court. Like fucking finally. I've been here for
Well, you don't.
11
Well, you don't
months
have a lawyer
already.
yet.
Don't have a lawyer yet. Don't have anything. You've been indicted. All this stuff. They've just signed everything. You don't need to sign anything. Either you sign it or you don't sign it. Doesn't matter. The first day after I confessed, right, they brought me, this is fucking hilarious, but it's really sad. They brought me a piece of A4 paper and they were like, this is your leniency agreement. And it says here that you will get 4 years for the crime of robbery and a 40,000 renminbi fine. And then underneath that, it says, see attachment one. And I was like, where's attachment one? And the officer's like, sign this piece of paper and shut up. Otherwise, I'll take this piece of paper away and there'll be no leniency agreement. And you'll start at 6 years, but you'll probably get 10 or 12 years because you haven't cooperated. And I'm like, dude, I asked the number one, every room has like a number one who's a Chinese guy with a foreign nationality. I asked him like to translate to the officer, like, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but clearly stated here is like, there's more to this paperwork than just one page. I want to see the attachment. I want to know what I'm signing. Bam, just slams the door and tells me like, go fuck yourself. So then when I finally went to court, I was like, oh, they're still using the leniency agreement. I'm actually getting 4 years, you know? I just thought that I pissed away my chance and that I would start at 6 years or 10 years. I started to believe what the officer told me too much. So the door opens and they're like, and so my Chinese name is Danny, because my middle name's Dane, right? So when they looked at my passport, they were like, they didn't take the Matthew, they took the Dane. So my Chinese name was Danny, and they're like, Danny, like, go like, come. And you're going to court. And I'm like, I haven't seen a lawyer, I haven't seen my family, I haven't seen my embassy, I haven't done anything. They're like, no, it's today. So they handcuff me and they take me to the sick bay, which is like, say, 10 meters away from where my room is. And they bolt me into a tiger chair. They bring out a little phone stand and they're like, yep, here you are. They put a Samsung on the phone holder. And I see the little squares of the WeChat video call. And there's the woman from my embassy saying, hi. And once I was finished with her after 30 minutes, they literally came and they brought like a bunch of other squares opened up. And they're like, this is the jury. This is the prosecutor. This is the judge. They spent a bunch of time like making sure that the crest behind the judge was in perfect proportion so that when he gave me my sentence, I could see his head and the crest of the People's Republic of China. That took more time than my actual sentence. They read out a bunch of stuff real quickly and they were like, for the crime of robbery, how do you plead? I'm like, guilty. And they're like, okay. And but at the very start, they're like, oh, your lawyer says this. And I was like, time out, time out, time out, time out. Which one of these squares is my lawyer? At this point, I'm just finding it like it's almost like a black comedy, right? I'm like, this is ridiculous. But which one is my lawyer? And there's some girl who's like, hi, I'm a lawyer. Well, I haven't seen a lawyer. I haven't received any legal representation at this stage. And they're like, no, that's your lawyer. You can ask her anything now. Okay, I can ask her anything now. So I just asked her, are you really a lawyer? And she's like, yeah, I'm your lawyer. I was like, oh, amazing. Feel feel so represented. And then I got my 4 years and I went back to my cell. That was it.
How long did the process take?
15 minutes for them to adjust the camera so that I could see the judge's head and the crest, and the whole process for me took about 4 minutes. Yeah, it was insane.
What the fuck? All right,
No
man.
evidence, no anything. Just like for the crime of robbery, how do you plead guilty? Okay, the court finds you that you came to China, you robbed, you did this, 4 years sentence, boom, and 40,000 renminbi fine. That was it. And I was like, wow, okay, great. No evidence, no anything, no star witnesses, just.
Man, I can't even imagine how you'd be feeling at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty ambivalent at that stage, right? I was more angry at my embassy and I'd give it, like, I already knew I was getting the 4 years. So I was starting to try and figure out, like, okay, what am I going to do with the next 3 years and 2 months of my life? And, you start to get it when you become incarcerated for so long and you're treated like an animal, you become like, you become numb is one way of saying it, but you become institutionalized, right? Like you got to get on with your day to day. Like you got to pray, you got to work out, you got to try and maintain some sense of normalcy. Otherwise, you just go fucking bananas. You go crazy, and then you're no good to anybody when you finally get home, right? So I was pretty wary of that very early on in my case, and that only got amplified when I went to prison and saw so many more people with so much more adversity. I was like, wow.
How was it? Can you tell me more about prison and the people you met there?
Yeah, like so I had to go to war with them to even transfer me from the detention center because they keep telling me the prison's closed, yeah, and you'll stay here because of coronavirus. And I was like, no, I can't stay in this one room for 4 years, man. I need to speak to my people. My tolerance for your bullshit at the moment is at an all-time low. So I went on a hunger strike, and then one very, very nice Chinese guy explained to me that I'm an ox, right? My lunar year is ox. And he said the ox doesn't move in winter. So you're trying to force these people to send you to prison in November and December. It's not going to work. He's like, you have to wait for spring until the snow thaws and then the ox can move. And I was like, so when do you think I will go to prison? And he was like, you'll go in May. Sure enough, 23rd of May, I was transferred to the prison. Um, and so I was taken out. And it was the first time in 504 days I'd been on my own. It was bliss. They put me in a van and I'm like, I'm just here on my own. I don't need to listen to seven other languages. I don't need to see people that it's like I don't need to watch somebody using the toilet. Like I can just be in this car and just like, so that was blissful. But then when I arrived to the prison, just more of the same shit in the detention center, just like sadism of the highest order.
What do you mean?
Like you're not receiving any medical care for one, right? So you got people with all kind of ailments. You got to remember some of these people have been in detention center for like 4 or 5 years,
You're
man. Some
talking
of the
the sadism on the
yeah.
detention
So
center.
when you
Oh,
get to the
yeah.
prison, it's like the sadism is continuing. They're like asking you, do you have any medical ailments? And some guys are half killed over. They got all sorts of rashes, and people are literally on their deathbed, right? Because the detention is so brutal, and they're coming to the prison, and the prison is saying like, oh, you don't need medicine for that. You don't need medicine for that. Just drink hot water. Um, then you're given your uniform and you're all put in groups together and you got to go off and fend for yourself for another 45 days. And so I was transiting in summer, right? May. Um, and the Chinese were like, "Oh, you're only allowed to brush your teeth for 5 minutes and you have to go as a group and you brush your teeth and then you come back and I was like, time out, like, when's the time for shower?" And they're like, "No, no shower." I was like, "Bro, like shower is more important for me than eating food. Like how do you guys not shower? It's summer. Like, what are you talking about?" They're like, "No, they don't let us shower." I was like, that's crazy. So we weren't allowed to shower. We just have to sit on these little blue stool, which was breaking your back, and you're so hot. There's no fan, there's no air con, there's nothing. You're just copping it. And the room's so overcrowded. And yeah, then eventually after 34 days, I was like, fuck this, man, I'm going crazy. So when they said we can go out and brush our teeth, I just grabbed a basin full of water and just started throwing water on myself, taking my shirt off. I was just like, I can't take it anymore. I'm going crazy. I can't not shower for 34 days. That was probably the worst, some of the worst 34 days of my life, not being able to shower. So I eventually showered, and the police came like as if I'd murdered somebody. They came from everywhere. They had like riot shields and like phasers, and they were like, oh, going crazy. And I'm like, I have to shower. Like I'd reached my breaking point. Um, but that was pretty much transit was pretty crazy. Like you line up for medicine. There's no medicine anyway, but you line up for medicine, and one guy's like, "Oh, I've got like really bad piles." So the officer's like, "Okay, here's your suppository." So the guy grabs the suppository and he goes to walk back. Obviously, he wants to go to the toilet to like insert the suppository. But the officer's like, "Where are you going?" And he's like, "Well, I'm going to the toilet." He's like, "No, you put it in right here." The guy's like, "You want me to drop my pants and insert a suppository right here?" And the officer's like, "Yeah." So the guy, like in front of a bunch of people, 30 people standing in a line, the guy has to bend over and put the suppository. And then he can't even go and wash his hands and he has to go back to the room. And I was like, for what? Like, really, that's just sadism. That's just like, that's mental illness on behalf of the police. It don't need to be that brutal. But that was just a common thread the entire time I was arrested was just brutality. Unnecessary, totally unnecessary. You know?
That's not the perception I had of the Chinese. I wouldn't have expected Chinese jails to be like this.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just didn't have that impression. What
Yeah.
what other people did you meet there? Who else was in that cell with you? What type of people were they?
So like I met like a bunch of Chinese with foreign paperwork, and one of the funniest things that happened to me, like the first day that I was moved to this guy's room, he had told me that he was some billionaire married to some friend of Thaksin Shinawat's daughter, that he had a golf course in Hua Hin, and that he owned an airline. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Those are all big calls. So the police took me out with him and they handcuffed me to him and they took me to another room to like interrogate me or, basically orientate me in the detention center. And instead of like me sitting down and him standing up and like, so we're chained together, right? Like I'm handcuffed to him. He sits in the chair and then I got to sit on the floor. And I'm like, I'm a grown man, man. I'm not gonna sit on the floor while I'm handcuffed to this guy. You're supposed to stand up and I sit in the chair and you translate for me with the officer. He's like, no, you fucking sit on the floor. I sit in the chair. I was like, what the this guy's lost it. I'm like, you say you're a British citizen, but man, you're behaving like an animal. So anyway, like he tells the officer, like, don't worry, this guy won't have any problems. He's in my room. And then when I got back to his room, like the guy was he'd fully lost it. He was convinced that he was writing his own religion, that he could levitate. He plucked his hair. He's like, see my hair? Like I'm reversing the aging. I'm reversing the aging period because it's gone from gray to black. And I'm like, no, man, it's not. Your hair's gray and he was a psycho. But the scary thing was he had so much control, right? Because he'd been nominated as like the number one in the room. So they gave him so much props, but he was a complete maniac. And he'd like convinced himself that he could heal people. And then he would like force people in the room to allow him to do his like healing on them, which involved like scraping them with like hairbrush handles and wild, man. It was like people really like lost feeling in their legs and stuff like that. And any time that they said, no, look, I don't really want any treatment today, then he would like call the police and be like, this guy's fighting with me. He's not following orders. And they would chain that person for like 15 days or 3 weeks. He was a psychopath, man. And I later went to prison and he was in the same prison with me. But it was pretty scary. But it was the first time during my incarceration that I got to see that like the like Chinese born foreign nationals were like worse than the police, man. They were worse than the police. They had all this power because the Chinese are inherently lazy, man. They just want to delegate everything. The police are like, I'm not fucking doing anything. So you guys, you'll do everything for me on my behalf because you can speak English, so therefore you can handle the foreigners, and the Chinese view you as being like elite because you have a foreign passport, right? So these guys take on this like kind of middleman service within the prison system, and they do all the things that the officers don't want to do, like disciplining and all this sort of stuff. And they get tiny reward. They get a banana or a yogurt here or there, um, or they're allowed a little bit more phone time, but they lord it all over everybody. So that was the first time I was like, hold on a minute. Like I've always thought of like the Chinese with foreign passports to be like, you know, more cultured, and I can relate to those people more, but they were the fucking worst. They were worse than the poor Chinese that have never traveled, that don't have any understanding. And they were just using each and every aspect of the prison to their own benefit. Like they go to speak to the embassy, and the police would tell them when Danny goes to the embassy, when he comes back, you have to translate what he tells me. So you go to meet with your embassy, and then the Chinese guy, who's also an Australian citizen, when you go back to your room, he translates everything you said to the officer. I mean, they're recording it anyway, right? But they just act as this like militia, and so that was the first time when I dealt with the British Chinese guy who thought that he was that the
The
Messiah.
Jesus. Did
Yeah.
you? Were there like gangs like we see in movies and in Western jails, or groups of
Um,
ethnicities?
No, like the Chinese were super cocky because the police were supporting them, right? So they were always super cocky, and they'd get the shit beaten out of them every now and then whoever beat the shit out of a Chinese would get half murdered by the police, right? And electrocuted and then chained and then like dragged through the entire detention center on all fours and have to apologize to all the rooms and say like, hey, don't mess with these people, man. If you have a problem with the Chinese in China, it's not a good idea. Like, so I saw that a lot. And we used to hate it because the Chinese felt so emboldened, right? They think they're so gangster. And but there wasn't so many gangs. Obviously, there's an overwhelming amount of Igbo people, like the Nigerians. So and from distinctly Igbo people, they have their own language, right? They speak Igbo amongst themselves. So just by default, they became um, not a gang, but they became a community. And then, so when I got to prison, prison's completely different, right? But it's still torturous and it's still overcrowded and it's still dirty and it's still the worst prison on earth because you can't pray. You're completely isolated from your people. You get one 5-minute phone call a month if the phone's working. Um, it's just a nightmare. But there's a huge contingent of Pakistan people there that are involved in the heroin trade, Taiwanese people that are involved in like telefraud, and some old Japanese drug traffickers and some Afghanis, and there's
Old
a smattering
Japanese.
of people. Yeah, like they not, I don't want to say the Yakuza, but like whichever organized crime group, they use these very old, like senior men, 89, 90, 91, 93
Holy
years old
shit.
to traffic drugs. Yeah, because they feel that they're above suspicion, right? But then the police are well and truly onto it. So there's a bunch of them, and then a bunch of other like East Africans, like Uganda and Tanzania, Zambia, Kenya. But yeah, and then
Were any treated better or worse than others, other than the Chinese?
like the Chinese with foreign passports were treated much better, right? And then they were treated not only better by like the police, but they were also treated by our embassy, right? Like I'll give you an example. Like I was incarcerated with one Chinese guy. He's Australian. We'll call him Kevin, right? So when I went to transit, like I was sent from the detention center, I went through the transit. It took me 45 days. The embassy told my family, we can't contact him for that 45 days, and he can't contact us. Then I went through that 45 days. I went to the general population. I was with all the other prisoners and I wanted to use the phone. I couldn't use the phone. I had to physically write a letter to the Australian embassy and mail it to the Australian embassy for them to upload my phone numbers in the prison phone system so that I could call my people. So that took from May. I was in the transit for 45 days. That means I got to general population in like June. And then I had to wait all July and all August before I could speak to my people. So 2 extra months. But I hadn't spoken to my people since May, right? When Kevin, the Chinese Australian guy, when he came through transit, the embassy visited him, brought him photos of his children, allowed him a 2 kilo package from the outside with food and coffee and everything. And then the day that he came to general population, I told him, hey, Kevin, you have to write a letter to the Australian embassy. They're really poor on this customer service. You'll have to write a letter and then they'll upload your numbers in the system. And he was like, no, they visited me in transit. My numbers are already in the system. And so he picked up the phone and called his wife straight away. So straight away, I could see that like the Australian embassy, they were stratifying citizenship, which is something that you would never imagine. Like, bro, as an Australian, you're like, we are the most multicultural nation on earth. Like, we take in everybody, everybody's treated equal. We all have a common goal to live the best life we can. It's the first time in my life I was like, there's first class Australians, business class Australians, and economy class Australians. And it just drove me crazy. At every turn, the Australian embassy focused all of their resources into the Chinese born Australian citizens and none into Matthew Ridelge. Um,
That's
and that
sad.
was a common thread. That was a common thread. And it drove me crazy. It drove the British guys crazy. It drove the Canadians crazy. It drove the Americans crazy because it was across the board. Each and every one of our embassies prioritized the resources for Chinese with foreign paperwork, not for born and bred Australians or born and bred Americans. Yeah, it was wild.
Um, were they? I'm trying to compare to the Western prisons. In those movies, you see a lot
Yeah.
of fights, brawls happening all the time. Did that
Yeah.
happen
No, you got fights, right? But it's not the same as like American prison where everybody's ganged up and like,
Yeah, yeah.
Bloods and Crips. It's not like that at all. But by default, right, language groups. So the Pakistan community is there, and so those guys with other Muslims are pretty tight. Other Muslims don't really mix with other people. And then, the Christians, right? Like the Igbo community, they're Christian. And so, yeah, by default, you end up then the Taiwanese mix together because um, they'd been together for a long time. Most of them have been doing telefraud all around the world. So those guys are actually in kind of like organized crime, but there's no like prison gang. Like you join the, didn't
But there were
go to prison. And
fights.
there's loads of fights, but no weapons and stuff like that. There was more fights in the detention center though. But the thing you find about like to say you're not in a gang that's like an organized gang, but like I'll give you an example. When you go to the toilet in the morning, there's 5 cubicles, right? There's 5 latrines, like squat toilets. There's no divider, so everybody can just see what everybody else is doing, right? Like I can see your junk, I can see this guy's junk. 5 guys, people brushing their teeth, and then there's a radiator, and there's 5 soaps on top of the radiator, and each soap is representative of one of those latrines, right? So if you come in just Mario on his own, like I want to use the toilet, you can't because there's like 15 Tanzanians that are waiting to use that toilet, or there's 30 Nigerians that are waiting to use that toilet that are all like backed up behind their brother who's using the toilet at the moment. So you don't join a gang as in like, yeah, man, I'm a blood or a crip or whatever the classic gangs are in US prisons, but you certainly have to gravitate towards a community, and then in that you get equitable access to resources. So it's more of a resource play rather than like tariff and all that stuff. It's not so
Is
crazy.
there a were you part of a community? Is there like an Australian community or an OECD
No, like
community?
I gravitated towards the Swahili speakers, so the East Africans, and I learned Swahili, which
Oh
was
shit.
something that filled my life with a lot of joy and gave me a lot of purpose. And if you're going to fill 4 years on your own, the Chinese are not going to help you with anything. So you got to learn Spanish and brush up on your Chinese and Swahili and whatever languages you have access to. So I learned Swahili from some Tanzanian guys and a Kenyan guy and a Zambian guy who was also my room leader. And so I became very close to them by default by being able to speak their language. But most of the Christians in the prison were pretty chill, man. Like, they're pretty big into forgiveness. So there was a lot of, whilst you're not allowed to organize religion, there was a lot of prayer. There was a lot of camaraderie amongst people within their own religious groups. And so there was a lot of people that had been there for a very long time. And those people were generally cool-headed. Prison tends to bring out the best and the worst in people. So a lot of the times, there would be a scuffle, and then it would be like, okay, like one Igbo guy punched a Pakistani guy, so then all the Pakistani guys are going to come and fight all the Nigerians, and then cool heads prevail, and they're like, hey man, like it's not worth it. Everybody
You
just
didn't. Was there another thing you didn't mention? Is something that happens in Western prisons like rapes or murders? Do you see that as well in Chinese
yeah.
prisons, or not really?
So
They seem
you
a lot more
did,
strict.
yeah, they're way more strict. Like you can't masturbate, man. If you masturbate, they'll cut your points. So, but and
You
also
can't.
there's like,
This is there's some stupid rules that don't make sense. We said earlier there's no, you're not allowed to have a shower without your clothes. It's just
yeah,
why would you not? Why would they not allow you to masturbate? If anything, it makes you probably more violent.
yeah, it's crazy. So the system is like, you have a prison bureau which sits above the prison officers, and the prison bureau kind of sets policy for the prison. And so like they're like, you can't shower with your clothes showing because the prison bureau doesn't want to see your naked body. And you're like, well, if you don't want to see my naked body, then send me home or
Or
don't
turn off
have
the
a
fucking
camera in the
cameras.
shower. Yeah, right. So stuff like that was pretty common. You go
Was
to
there
the
cameras everywhere?
Yeah, there's cameras everywhere. There's 3 cameras in the toilet. There's 2 cameras in the cell that's only 5 meters by 2 meters. There's cameras everywhere. And more so than there's cameras everywhere, there's a point system, and that point system goes towards people's reduction. So someone like me who has a 4-year sentence, you don't think about reduction. You serve every day of that sentence. But somebody that's given a life sentence, for example, right? They have to get enough points to change that life sentence from life to a number. So these people are forever at the mercy of the police, and the police are making up these new stupid rules every day. And if you don't follow it to the letter, there's a complete crew of officers that come in after yesterday, like they watch the tape from yesterday, top to bottom, and they find any infraction. So they're like, okay, Mario was looking out the window for like 2 seconds at 3 p.m. yesterday. So therefore, we cut Mario's points 15 points because he's not allowed to stare out the window. And then 3 people have
That's
to
not.
go to
Hold
the
on. That's
toilet.
not a. That's not a thing, is it? You're just making it
Yeah,
up
you're not
here.
allowed to
Looking out
look
the.
out the window. Yeah, you're not allowed to cover your head when you sleep. You're not allowed to touch another prisoner. You're not allowed to give another prisoner something. You're not allowed to help somebody. 3 people have to go to the toilet at the same time. They have to walk and they have to follow a yellow line. It can't be like two and one. It has to be three together. Like it's never ending, man. It's never ending. Yeah.
Fucking hell, those
So that's
rules are
why
a
when
lot of torture.
people talk to me, um, that have been in prisons all around the world when I was in that prison, and they all said the same thing. They're like, "This is the worst prison on earth, Danny," because say you're in Ecuadorian prison or you're in Latvian prison, like you get left alone, man. The officers just leave you alone. You read your Bible, you sit on your bed. You want to go exercise, you exercise. You want to go to the workshop and earn money, you go to the workshop. You want to enroll in a class and learn a language, you go. But in Chinese prison, there's zero. It's not a prison, it's a forced labor camp. All you do is work in the factory, make money for the Chinese government, and then you just suffer through the madness and the paranoia of this stupid system of everything being tallied up at the end of the day. It's not for 1 second in my entire 5 years, almost 5 years that I was incarcerated, was I ever be able to just like and just take a deep breath and relax. I was constantly treading on eggshells. It's mind numbing.
So you're saying the things, considering how strict they are, you wouldn't see Is there any drugs at all in prison or any
No, no, nothing like
cigarettes?
that. But I would say before Xi Jinping took power in 2013, it used to be a lot looser. Now, like the Chinese were smoking cigarettes and they had
It
mobile
became a lot
phones and
stricter
stuff
now.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, after Xi Jinping came in, he put a lot of his political enemies in prison, and therefore he changed a lot of the rules regarding life sentences and duration. He removed all of the reduction, and he just made it really unbearable, man, to be honest.
Jesus
And
Christ.
so there's a
What type
lot
of
of
food
guys
did
that
you
have
eat?
been there. Uh, Pretty much just cabbage all day, every day, steamed cabbage and rice. If you're lucky to get rice, otherwise they give you this steamed bun called manto. But the food was poisonous. It's taken me the best part of 14 months of being free to kind of reprogram my gut and to be able to hold down
Fucking
food
hell.
and live a normal life, man. Yeah. Um, just the cleanliness, like the water was not clean. You're drinking unclean water your entire existence. You're eating, food that's market seconds, that's rotten and then boiled to oblivion. And the rice is not really rice, it's plastic rice. Or if they do decide to cook something with oil, it's oil that's coming out of the sewer. Or, it's the prison. They're looking at it as like you're not even human, you're an animal. So yeah, you don't get any choice with regards to food. You just
And
gotta like it or lump it.
the allegations that you stole your own phone. That's fucking mental.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
so I
Yeah,
was
it's
gonna say
mental.
when
I'm agreeing with
you're
you.
close to finishing you're finishing your sentence. How
Yeah.
were the last days? Because I think from what I remember when I was looking to your story, you did something. Oh yes, you fucking
I
punched
got into a
someone
fight.
not long.
Yeah,
Fucking
I
hell,
got
what
into a
happened there?
fight. It was wild, man. And so I just turned the corner and then I was headed for the
So that was not far before you're released.
six
Few
months
weeks or
before I
months.
got released, yeah, from
6
my
months.
original sentence. So 6th of June, and leading up to that, I'd had this sense of hopelessness, right? And like, how will I ever recover from here? How will I ever get back my life? My business is finished. The police have stolen everything. I've got nothing to live for, etc. And then, my fiance, my father, they kept me back on track, and we finally reached that point where you're like, okay, we've turned the final corner, and I'm down the home stretch. I just got 6 months. All I got to do is 6 months, and I'm life is, for the first time in a long time, life is fairly good because you can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. And some Taiwanese guys started a fight with my friends from East Africa, and I ran towards my friend Jonathan to try and kind of protect him because he likes to fight, and he was going home in August, so he was going home in 2 months. And I ran towards him, and as I ran towards him, one of the Taiwanese guys made a beeline for me and tried to throw hands, and I just instinctively punched him. And the fact that he was moving and I was moving, it's like amplified the power of the punch by a factor of 10, and I broke his nose. And he'd never been punched in the face before, right? So he wasn't like a kind of person that absorbed it. He just, his nose instantly started bleeding. And then his guys, they put his hands under his arms like this, and his head was leaning forward instead of keeping his head elevated, right? So he just, blood was all over his shirt. And the police took that as like, you have punched one of us. You, the Taiwanese and the Chinese and the prisoner are all, together, thick as thieves. So the police were like using the Taiwanese to do their bidding. And the Taiwanese were starting like mini wars with the Nigerian community, with the East African community. So the situation was really fucked up. It was really tense, right? Um, and it all boiled over because we weren't allowed to watch a boxing match. It was the trilogy of Canelo and Gennady Golovkin, and the Taiwanese wanted to listen to like some KTV music. And so they stood up and they were like, no, you're not going to watch the boxing. And we were like, dude, sit down. Who are you guys? So then 50 of us stood up, like African community. And then the police came and they turned off the TV. And the Taiwanese were like, nah, 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 like little kids, right? Like, if we can't watch it, you can't watch it. So from that day on, it was war. About 2 weeks later, I guess. Um, or say a couple of months later, they had a fight, and I ran to protect Jonathan, and I punched that guy in self-defense, and the police blew it up into this huge matter. They said it has to go to an outside prosecutor. The damages are so, which is so funny because nobody ever gets any medical treatment in that prison, right? But they rushed this guy to an outside medical facility, and they informed, like the foreign ministry, and they made it so that it became such a big case that they couldn't just let me go. And then they put me in solitary confinement. So I spent the final 7 months of my initial sentence in solitary confinement, being interrogated for 5 hours at a time. I had a chain around my leg the entire time. I was in a 1.8 meter by 1.2 meter room that was basically pitch black for 16 hours a day. And I was left there until I again confessed to the material facts of the case to say that I, for no reason, just ran and punched the Taiwanese guy. And again, wasn't given legal representation. Again, wasn't allowed to speak to my family for the entire time I was there. I was only allowed to
Oh,
write
no.
letters. So I ended up spending 194 days in solitary confinement. I went from 72 kilos to 57 kilos during that time. And I finally, on my wife's birthday, on the 5th of
How was
December.
solitary?
Solitary was unbearable, man. What do you think? You start to go crazy. You're in pitch black, and then you get 2 hours of sunlight. You try to borrow a pen, you try to read the Bible, then you get pitch black again while the sun's going over. Um, and you're in 1.8 by 1.2 meters. Your bed is right next to the latrine toilet. You got a shower on top of the toilet, with a basin of water. You got two cameras. There's no ventilation. There's no fan. There's no air con. There's no window that opens. So you're just sitting in your own um, juices, right? For want of a better word. And then, so I went there in June. By July, which is midsummer in Beijing, it's 55 degrees in the room and about 42 in the hallway.
You're talking,
And
sorry, Celsius?
Celsius. It's more than 50, because I can tell you on the hottest day in summer, it was 42 degrees. And the officer came and he opened the door and he went, whoa, like that as the heat from my room came out. And he was like, what? How? Like, wusha wu do. He was like 55 or more. And so as I walked out into 42 degrees, it felt like 20, like I felt like I needed a sweater. And he was covered in sweat because it was 42 degrees. And then when I went back, I turned back around after doing what I had to do. I had to fill up my water bottle. When I turned back around to walk into my room, I literally had to like, I felt like I was walking into like water. Like the room was at least 10 degrees hotter than outside. So I spent the best part of 4 months in 50-degree heat. And
How, how is it when you're sitting, when you said you're sitting in pitch black for 16 hours? What goes on in your head? How do you get
where
through this time?
you start to hallucinate, you start to talk to people, you start to have very long conversations with your family members who are not actually there. um, I started to hallucinate to the point where the officers would come and ask me like, Nigamana, like, what's up, like, who are you talking to? I'm like, I'm talking to my wife. Why? What is it, your problem? Is it your job to just leave me the fuck alone and let me talk to my wife? So you start to go crazy. You start to, you're chasing mosquitoes as well. Like that's your full-time job. You're trying to bat off the mosquitoes in pitch black, and you're just trying to keep your shit together because you realize that no matter what happens, you got to try and stay sane because you got to go home at some point. And the added stress for me was the fact that I was supposed to be going home in 6 months, and they didn't tell me the day they took me to solitary, like, because you broke his nose, you're getting an extra sentence. That entire period, they interrogated me. They left me there. They kept banging on the door so I couldn't sleep at night. They just treated me like an animal. And then right at the end, they're demanding that I pay compensation. I said, hell no, I'm not paying anything. And then they gave me my sentence 2 weeks before I was supposed to fly home. I got my sentence on the 5th of September, the 5th of December, and I was supposed to go home on the 2nd of January. So that whole period of time, not only am I dealing with hallucinations, severe malnutrition, I had a staph infection, my fingernails turned green, I have no connection with my people, I'm not allowed to speak to anybody. I'm demanding that I go outside. I went on hunger strike. Then the police said, okay, you want to go outside? They let me outside into a medical quarantine area where they had like 20 people that have got tuberculosis. And they're like, you wanted to go outside? Here, you're outside. So after 5 minutes, every like 20, 15, 17 days at a time, they take me outside and only let me be in the area that's got tuberculosis people or people that have diseases that are in um, medical isolation, right? Quarantine. So it was torture. And on top of that torture, I had to explain to my family, like, there's a high chance, there's a high probability that I'm not coming home. And typical of the Chinese, like, they could have just on the first day, like June 6th, gone, hey, man, You broke the guy's nose. We're going to give you a year. The whole time they're interrogating me, interrogating me, interrogating me, interrogating me. They knew very well. And then when they took me to court, they were like, yeah, you're not going home until October 5th, 2020. So they added another like
10
nine,
months.
9 months. Yeah, 10 months. Yeah, so it was hell, man. It was a living hell. But only by the grace of God, only the strength that my father and that my fiance at the time, my now wife, gave me, I was able to pull through. And then my best friend in the entire prison, Peter Moomin, he was there with me, and he was in solitary for say 14 days because he was on his way to this prison, which is called Liaolin prison. And this is crazy. People need to understand this. When you were in the Chinese prison system, if you have hepatitis or HIV or tuberculosis, they take you out of general population and they move you to the prison hospital, right? And it's called Liaolin. Now, in theory, right, when you go to that prison hospital, you're supposed to be receiving medicine and treatment for your tuberculosis or your hepatitis. And during that period, you receive treatment, you go back to your standard prison. So that is proof that there is budget within the Chinese legal system to provide medical care. But people like Peter, they go there for 18 months. They don't receive any medicine, nothing. They don't receive any single medical treatment the entire time they're there. And then they get sent back to their prison. So in our case, Beijing number 3. And they're told, like, yeah, you're okay to be back with general population. So we're like, Peter, man, you must feel amazing. They cured your hepatitis. He's like, they didn't give me any medicine the entire time I was there. And on top of that, for the 18 months that he's in that prison, he's not eligible for points. So not only are they not giving him medicine, they're sending him to a prison where he's no longer eligible for points that he desperately needs to get reduction on his sentence. So he's actually being punished for having hepatitis that he contracted in Chinese detention center. It's insane. And people are like, yeah, man, China is so progressive. China China's changed. I'm like, with my own eyes, I can tell you, I've seen China moving backwards. It's going backwards 25 years.
How did it feel when you finally came out? And how did you
It's
also,
I
maybe this is a good time as well, how you got so throughout your entire prison sentence, one thing that got you
yeah.
through is you were able to document your entire story, not on paper
Yeah,
because they wouldn't give you a pen and paper, but you
yeah,
managed to smuggle in through, I think, the Taiwanese face masks where you wrote the story on those, and then you managed to smuggle
yeah.
that out,
So
correct?
it would no, it was like some North Korean guys taught me how to write small, and they gave me the idea to use the inner ply on the coronavirus mask, right? Because you got to understand, I was in prison the entire coronavirus from the day before, like 2 weeks before I got arrested. Coronavirus hits, and then the entire coronavirus, I'm incarcerated. And throughout that process, you have to wear a mask, right? And the police were using the mask as like torture. Like I wear my mask like 18 hours a day. The thing's sopping wet with like sweat, and they wouldn't allow you to get another one. They're supposed to be single-use masks, and we had to like wash them. And that's how long we used them. Maybe every 2 weeks they would give you another one. It was crazy. But in that, I had an abundance of this raw material, right? Which is the inner ply. And if you rip it open, the inner ply is quite tensile. You can write on it, and then you can also roll it up into a ball, where you can't do any of those things with paper. You can write on paper, but you can't fold it to a point where you can traffic it outside. So I started keeping a journal, and it got to the point where I was pretty much documenting everything that had happened in the prison. I documented a lot of the companies that were using us for slave labor in the factory. And then I just kind of documented my own thoughts, my own struggle with the entire process of losing an incredibly prime slice of your life, right? 34 to 39 it's pretty hard to swallow. And then it got to the point where some people found out that I had been keeping this journal and that I intended on smuggling it out of the prison, and they were pretty keen to try and get their contact details into that journal so that I could then make it to the outside world and contact their people. You got to understand, the same problems I had with the Australian embassy multiplied by factors of 100 when you deal with some of the African countries. So I can't call my father unless my embassy puts my father's phone number in the phone system. I can't send a letter straight to my wife. I got to send it to the embassy, who then forwards it to my wife. Now, the Australian embassy is pathetic at the best of times, but like, let's say the Nigerian embassy, they don't even answer their phone. They don't even, like, there's no way for a Nigerian that's being in prison to contact his people um, for huge extended periods of time. And then all of a sudden, the Nigerian embassy will be like, there'll be a change of staff and they're working again, or the Tanzanian embassy is the same. So there's a lot of guys that have been in that prison that have just had no ability to communicate with their family for 7, 10 years even. And they were like, Danny, I know you're going home. Please help me, man. I've got like a niece in the US and like I haven't been able to speak to her. Nobody knows I'm arrested. Nobody knows where I went. I just disappeared in 2017 and I've not been able to speak to my people. So I started documenting all of these people's struggles and I started writing down all of their contact details and it swelled to about 60 in total. So when I finally smuggled the
60,
journal,
60. What exactly?
60 families, 60 contact details for 60
Oh, wow.
prisoners. So when I got out, I finally smuggled the journal, which is, an incredible story in its own.
Can you tell that story? How did you manage to get the journal out?
Yeah, for sure. So throughout my entire incarceration, I had been very, very adeptly moving this journal from like place to place and storing it in different parts of the prison and then updating it and then storing it again because you have constant inspections, right? Every day is an inspection. Every day is an inspection, inspection, inspection. So I'm playing cat and mouse with the prison bureau my entire life, but it's giving me this purpose, right? And it's like without that cat and mouse, I would have felt those 4 years, far more than what I did because I had this purpose and I had this vision that this is not only documenting the atrocities, this is also helping me to, have a um, very straight dialogue with myself and it's creating privacy. I've got a private place where I can retire now and I can be alone with my thoughts. And then also it's art, no one's ever smuggled it 54 pieces of micro printed like journal from a Chinese prison. It's unheard of. So I'm thinking the whole time. And one of the Scottish prisoners kept G'ing me up. He was like, dude, it's art. Like, I'm a photographer. This is art. I'm telling you, Danny, you got to get this thing out of the prison. Um, so it got to the stage where the thing had swollen, right? And then I went to solitary confinement and people had to keep it safe for me. Then I got back from solitary. And again, they had to send it from another part of the prison to me, which I could get into how complicated that is, but it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, now I got to get it out of the prison. And the Tanzanian guys were telling me, and they're all drug traffickers by trade. They were like, you can't get it out of the prison in your clothes. You can't like, there's no way. You can't even get it out in your ass. Like, there's no way. The police are going to tear everything you own to shreds before you go. They'll give you the clothes you were arrested in, and that's it. And they're going to search you top to bottom. You got to swallow it. And I was like, yeah, okay, no problem. After 5 years of prison, you're like, I could pretty much do anything I put my mind to. So
How
they
big were they? So there's a lot of material, I
So the
guess.
the masks are maybe like say that big in total, right? Like when they're all on top of each other. But when you wrapped it up in, first we put it inside plastic bags that we got, and then we made it into like a bullet, right? Like that, like a Kinder Surprise, right? So these guys were telling me like this is the industry standard. This is the 10 grams that we normally swallow full of heroin or assorted other drugs, and this is easy for any drug mule to swallow this. All you got to do is just swallow it. And I was like, fine, like no problem. I couldn't swallow it. And I was trying, like, I was sitting in factory and we're supposed to be working and I'm putting it in my mouth and trying to swallow it. And it's coming back. And I'm like, what? And I'm reaching. And man, it was like, it took 4 months for them to get enough of the sticky tape to make the bullet. And then the risk of taking the nail cutters out of the barber shop, which you can imagine if, like, looking out the window is a crime. Imagine what sentence addition you'll get for smuggling nail clippers out of the barbershop. So these boys really went out of their way and risked their life and limb to help me to make that bullet to swallow it. And I couldn't swallow it. And I just felt really, really bad, man. And people were getting in my face. Like, and again, Peter Moomin, my brother from Papua New Guinea, um, he was because he's been there for such a long time. He was telling people, hey man, he can't fucking swallow it. Like he's also devastated. Like it means more to him than it means to you. Um, so he really helped me. But the entire time that I was writing the journal, like I did know that my North Face jacket was all ripped from when I got attacked by the mob. And I did know that like there was space where I could probably put my hand in and get it somewhere close to the zip or and as it played out, when I got closer to being released from the prison, they were like, okay, go and check your clothes that you've got and go and check your belongings at another building. And when I went there, I saw the North Face jacket and it was all fucked up. And when I sort of grabbed it, I put my hand in and I realized you could put your hand in this rip and it went all the way and you could like drop something at the back. Obviously, if the police really wanted to like scrunch it like this and go through it, they would have found it. But I was like, nah, I'm pretty sure Like these guys, they're not going to go to that extreme. So I had that in the back of my mind while I was building the journal, right? So then eventually, when it got to this harsh realization that I can't swallow this bullet, it just won't go down. I don't have the gag reflex to be a drug trafficker. So I went back to my original plan. I unwrapped it on the day, 3 days before I left the prison. The police gave me my jacket, they gave me all my clothes, and they were like, "You got to wash this and give it back to us." So one officer escorted me to the washroom. There was another officer standing like at a 45-degree angle, and two cameras were watching me. And my prison shirt had like a top pocket. So I rolled the mask in like a bunch with toilet paper just to make it look like somebody that's got toilet paper in their top pocket, right? Um, and then when the officer wasn't looking, my friend Peter was singing and trying to like distract them. And I was so nervous, like my whole mouth was dry and my hand was shaking, man. Because if they find the material, they find out like this guy's recording all of the factory, like the work people he's working for in the fact, like you can't be recording the fact that Luck and Coffee, the major sponsor of the Australian Open, is using Chinese prison slave labor. You can't, the prison themselves is going to want to protect that kind of information. So I was very wary that like this thing could backfire and I could end up in a, facing another sentence, right? So, but I managed to put it inside my jacket. And then at one point, the officer was even asking Peter, like, why are you so fucking happy? Like, Matthew's the one that's going home. He's like, you still got 20 years. Like, you need to calm down and just wash those clothes and shut up. So eventually
He
we
was
gave
trying to
them back the
he was
clothes.
trying to Peter,
Yeah.
your friend Peter was
He
trying to distract them. Yeah.
God bless him, man. He did the Lord's work and he kept them at bay. And then I gave it to them. And the funny thing was, right, the irony of it all, one of the officers, Miao Zhong, he came to me and he was the one that was standing behind me the whole time. And he got right in my face. And he asked me in Chinese, like, did you forget anything? And he was giving me the crazy eyes. And he was like, are you finished with your jacket? Ni jeshula shi fuma? And I was like, yeah, jeshula, like I'm finished. And he's like, finished? Like this looking into my soul, man. And he's like, you sure you haven't forgotten anything? And I was like, yeah, yeah, I'm positive. And I was at that stage, I was like, I'm done. He's found it. And I was just waiting for like prison bureau to come and back to solitary, and it never came. And it wasn't until the morning that I was supposed to be released that the police came, like in force. They came to my room, took all of my belongings, and sifted through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and didn't find anything. Because they actually, the day that we gave them my clothes back to keep safe for me, they took it all over the other
Why did
side
they?
to where
Why did they come that last day to do that deep search? Is that part of the
I would say
process?
somebody probably told them that I had the journal and that I was, maybe one of the Chinese with foreign passports or something had finally leaked it that Matthew's got this
Fucking hell, man!
extensive
I can't even
journal. Yeah.
imagine. You'd be on the edge. You'd be on
Yeah,
the
man. Well,
edge
so the thing,
as
the
they're trying to
reality
find.
was you're on edge anyway for the entire 5 years. And when there's a crazy feeling when you start to go home. Like you would think to yourself that the entire prison is super happy for you. But you realize like when people have been in prison for such a long time, people get very mentally ill. And mental illness doesn't always manifest itself the way that we think of it in the movies, right? Like some people, mental illness manifests itself in very dark ways. And, so people always tell you that last month before you go home, be careful, man, because there's dragon slayers, there's vampires that are going to come out, and there's people within this community that are going to want to try and tempt you to throw it all away and end up staying because in a sick way, like that's what they want to make themselves happy. They don't want to see you go. They want to see you stay. So
Like
as much as you've
inside, when
been
you say they like inside demons inside you trying to.
I mean, demons inside other people, other prisoners is like they don't want you to go
Oh,
home.
other
They're
prisoners
not
wanna.
happy for you. Yeah.
They want you to get into trouble. They wanna pick a
Exactly.
fight
They
or
come
something,
out of
so
the
they stay in
they come
prison.
out of the woodworks, and it's the strangest thing. And you like that last month, you're supposed to be feeling so incredible because it's like, I'm done, man. I've been through the fire. Like I can see the finish line. But it's actually one of the most stressful times of your life because you're guarded and making sure that you don't give anybody any option, like any opportunity to take you down because they will. And the one thing is the police, like what happened to me, right? They're not going to let you break some guy's nose and just walk out of here. They're going to make an example and be like, you can't just 1 month before going home do XYZ. There's a huge punishment for that. So the last month is so stressful. And then on top of that, um, yeah, I'm trying to deal with the journal and it was crazy. It was really it wasn't until I'd been engaged gotten married and then was on my honeymoon, I think, which is 4 months, 5 months after I've been released from the prison, that I realized like I don't have all this tension in my neck. I can actually sleep. Like I was so tightly wound, man, from being in that extreme, under such extreme stress for such a long time, that it was really, really clear to me that it took many, many months for me to be outside, eating well, living well, surrounded by love, surrounded by my faith. Um, and it was a stark reminder to me that, like, wow, man, you've really been through it. It's not an easy place.
I'm so pissed off at the Australian embassy, out of all people.
Yeah,
They're supposed to stick up for you.
I'll tell you something crazy. So I would have thought, right? This is just best practices, right? So whenever you got a citizen that went through something like I went through, in the quest to try and be better as an organization, and you probably find this yourself in your business, um, that you break down things and situations and you analyze them and you say, hey, how could we as a company or we as a country or we as a department have done this better, right? Like we are customer facing, like Matthew, whether he's incarcerated or not, he is our customer in this situation. And did we actually serve the customer or did we just serve ourselves? Did we actually act according to the best of our ability or did we just cruise? So the State Department, I know this for a fact, when Americans are released from prison, they contact them and they do a debriefing and they spend almost 2 hours with them asking them, how was your incarceration? Was there anything that we don't know? Give us up-to-date information about what's happening in the prison. You know better than we know. Help us so that we can update. So like, for example, the Australian government, the entire time they were telling me, if you pay your fine, you'll get a reduction. But they've been going to that prison since 2006 and they know good and well that nobody pays their fine because nobody gets a reduction. But the Australian embassy kept telling me, pay your fine, pay your fine, pay your fine. Because it wasn't the Australian embassy, it's Chinese people that run the Australian embassy. So after a multitude of things that I had grievances towards the Chinese members of the Australian embassy, consular services team, when I got home, I just thought the natural thing to do was like DFAT would want to talk to me, right? No. So then I was like, okay, if DFAT doesn't want to talk to me, I'll email them. And I emailed DFAT with a list of all of the times when the Chinese consular services team put my needs and my welfare behind Chinese Australians and just generally didn't care. They were taking medicine to James Sun, one of the Chinese Australians that's in the prison, and they were telling my family that they can't send medicine or buy medicine in China because they can't bring medicine to me in the prison. And I was like, but James is Australian Chinese and he's getting medicine, and I'm Australian. I was born in Australia. I was born and bred in Australia. I went to Australian school. But I can't get medicine from my own embassy. So I wrote all these things down. I itemized them and I sent it to DFAT. And DFAT got back
Who's
to me,
DFAT?
the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Okay.
So I emailed them when I got home and I was like, hey, I've just been incarcerated and this is all the problems that I had with your embassy staff in Beijing. Uh, I'm I'm looking for you guys to investigate the conduct of this certain staff member. And just for your own good, like you guys need to know that this is what's happening. You need to know that the Australian embassy in Beijing is being run by Chinese nationals and it's being hijacked and it's a fiefdom. And if I pay the staff there, they'll give me service. But that's not how we operate in Australia. Australia is not a corrupt despot. Australia has policies, we have procedures. So DFAT got back to me and they said, like, oh, we've investigated your claims, but we can't give you any information. And I was like, no, that's not good enough. So on the 30th of November, I filed a Freedom of Information Act. They got back to me twice requesting extensions. And it wasn't until late February they emailed me this heavily redacted two emails where one person said to his superior, hey, we just received this email from Matthew Ridelge. Go through it and then contact the people at Beijing Consular Services because you're more familiar with them. And then the other email, this is in the Freedom of Information Act, all the names and everything is being redacted. And it said, do you want me to reply to him line by line, or should we just email him that none of these claims hold merit? And that was it. And they never got back to me. So then I emailed that to Jan Adams's office, who's the director of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and she never got back to me. I emailed Penny Wong, our foreign minister. She never got back to me. So when I'm in prison, I'm asking them, I want to write a letter to the foreign minister, to the Australian embassy. They say, we can't let you write a letter to the foreign minister. We don't handle mail. I said, I want to write a letter to Anthony Albanese. They say, you can't write a letter to Anthony Albanese. We don't handle that kind of thing. You can only write to your family. This is my government is telling your government is telling you this. But then when I get out, Sydney Morning Herald is printing letters from a Chinese Australian who's incarcerated, who got his citizenship in 2010. I was born in 1985. My family's been in Australia since the 30s.
That is so fucking weird.
They're printing his letters in Sydney Morning Herald, appealing to the prime minister and the foreign minister. And the foreign minister's commenting and saying, we're deeply moved by the letter and that we're doing everything we can. But she won't even reply to my email. So that means
Why?
I don't understand.
Why?
I don't
What am I
understand
missing here?
what is the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade? What do they have to answer for? If anybody in Jan Adams's office or anybody in Penny Wong's office wants to send me an email, just look in your inbox. I've already emailed you. You know, you guys failed me. You failed so many other Australians. There's Chinese Australians that don't even speak English. One guy, we call him Wong Jimmy, doesn't speak English, but he has an Australian passport. He's been Australian for 20 years. I'm asking him, who gave you that Australian passport? Say, my sister used an agent in Sydney. So the embassy's bending over backwards to accommodate Wang Jimmy's family so they can speak to him. But they're telling my family, don't contact the embassy directly, only contact DFAT in Canberra. It was a nightmare, man.
That is
So
so twisted.
on top of the torture that I received and the extrajudicial punishments that I received from the Chinese, and your health failing and not being able to speak to your family, not being able to pray, just being completely ravished, you're malnourished, you're sleep deprived. I had to deal with the Australian embassy on top of that. It was like if I'd just been able to circumvent the stupid embassy, I could have gotten so many things done. But I was at the mercy of these people at the embassy, and they didn't even hide the fact. I wrote a letter to the ambassador and I was complaining about consular services. I wrote the letter to the ambassador and I didn't write the prison address. I didn't use my own handwriting. And I said in that letter clearly, I want this woman removed from my case because she is not helping me at all. She's actually hindering my progress. So the embassy, they said, no, we never received a letter. I said, I didn't send it to consular services. I sent it to the ambassador's office. And I told the ambassador in that letter, someone from your office should contact my father and let him know that you've received this letter. Nobody contacted my father. DFAT in Canberra was telling my father, we haven't found the letter. We tried so hard, but the letter's not at the embassy. So when I left the prison, I asked the people from DFAT, from consular services, sorry, can you send all the hard copies of the letters? Because I've been sending letters to the embassy and then they've been scanning them and emailing them to my family. So I want those hard copies. So can you please send them back to Australia? And they were like, sure, no problem. We'd love to do that for you. So I was like, great. When I got back to my dad's house in Perth, on the coffee table is the letter that I wrote to the ambassador. So the ambassador doesn't have the letter. They couldn't find it at the ambassador's office. But consular services is so arrogant, acting with impunity, that they mailed it back to my father just to show me that, yeah, we got the letter, but we didn't give it to the ambassador.
Fucking hell.
So
Do you think
yeah,
other do
man,
you
it
think
was.
other consular services were hijacked the same way in China? Or just
Yeah,
the
for sure.
Australian
I
ones?
saw with my own eyes that the British embassy was exactly the same. When the Messiah was trying to call the embassy, they would speak to him 6 or 7 times a month. But when one other guy from Scotland, he would
The
call the
Messiah
embassy.
is the Chinese British guy, the one that thought he's
Yeah, the one
whatever.
that can levitate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that
Yeah,
he
and he
got
used to call the
attention, but the British guy, born and bred,
born and bred in Scotland. Yeah, exactly. He got no love from the embassy at all. They refused to speak
what
to
the
him. They
fuck
didn't
is
put
going
any
on?
phone numbers in the system. Nothing. It's crazy. And
I don't know what's more
it's,
twisted, man.
so I
Like,
know
is
I
it
have my own
the
theory, right?
Chinese
Like,
jail? Yeah, what's the theory?
yeah. So my theory is, right, because the language is so oppressive, right? Like if you don't speak Chinese in China, you're finished. You don't know what, like it's very hard for you if you don't have a local fixer, right? So these Chinese that work at the Australian embassy, they handle everything for the Australian staff that come, right? There's a rotating door of like counselors, right, that come from Australia. So these people, they need help, right? To help hook up the internet at their apartment. They need help to pay their utility bills. They need help with everything. So what do? They ask the local Chinese girl in their office. So the local Chinese staff in the Australian embassy, They have a relationship with the police because they've been coming to the prison for many, many years. They have a relationship with the families of the Chinese born Australians, and they also have a relationship with the counselors that come to the embassy from Australia. So these people are like an integral part in the way we do business in China. And they know that, and they've got far too much power concentrated in their hands. And they use it, they wield it. And so it's not just the Australian embassy, it's all the embassies in China that are dealing
But
like
it
that.
feels
The
it feels
American
but it
embassy
feels like,
only,
yeah.
sorry, the American
No, go ahead.
embassy only hires people that can speak Mandarin. So when the State Department comes to visit Americans, they have white, black, Chinese, doesn't matter, man, woman, child, they can all speak Mandarin, so they don't have to rely on local Chinese fixers. But the
So the
Australian embassies can,
Americans knew how to get around it, but the
they're
British and
smart,
the
man.
Australian,
Yeah,
no. But I feel like I don't know if it's intentional. I feel like they've turned a blind eye because it's not hard to figure that out. You've sent your letters. If you sent letters, if you had that problem and you spoke out, I'm sure many others, hundreds, if not thousands of
yeah,
others in the US and Europe did the same thing. I just feel like
yeah.
those countries are kind of fallen hostage to the big Chinese empire and the big Chinese economy, whereas the
Sure. I mean,
US
especially,
has that
yeah.
influence.
Well, the State Department is the State Department, right? And then you've got the trade section of your government. The Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I mean, like you telling me that Matthew Rodelge, when he's rotting away in a Chinese prison, I don't think I'm the focus of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I think it's heavily steeped towards the trade. And you know what? Like the reality is, I'm okay with that if I'm allowed to contact the outside world without having to use the embassy. But if I'm stuck having to use the embassy, then the embassy just has to do a better job, man. It's not my choice to have
No,
the Australian
I
government running around
disagree.
after me, you
You're an
know?
Australian citizen. You'd expect your
Yeah.
embassy, your government to care. What concerns me is that not only did they not really care for you, they've put the Chinese Australian above an Australian born and bred in Australia.
They
That one is
stratified
weird.
Australian citizenship, man. It really, really used to drive me crazy. And and I was so I had 5-minute phone calls once a month. You can't get anything done with a 5-minute phone call. But I was screaming down the phone to my dad, like, this is what's happening. You need to contact DFAT in Canberra. You need to do this. You need to do that. And so my father's a career public servant. And he was like, nah, that's a conspiracy theory. He just couldn't understand it. He was like, no, like the Australian government, he had the blinkers on. He's like, the Australian government is fighting for your interests. Da, 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 da. But the reality was, it wasn't until I got home and I showed him, like, this is the letter to the ambassador. I showed him this multitude of things. And he was like, oh, wow. Yeah. So it was, I don't know. And the thing that hurt me the most was like, they don't want to invest time in being better and admitting that they made a mistake so they can help the next Australian that comes. I'm finished, man. I'm not going back to Chinese prison ever again. But surely the next Australian that gets arrested in China is going to be dealing with the exact same thing. And if I had to go through that for 5 years so that I can come out and try to change the way we do best practices, implement best practices at the consulate in Beijing, I would have thought that they would jump at the chance, but instead they've just ignored me and sent me a ridiculously redacted FOI. It's crazy.
Holy shit. Would you ever go back to China ever again under any circumstances?
No, I'm banned for 10 years anyway, but the feeling is mutual. Yeah, that's
Fucking
completely
hell.
fine by me.
Man, what a fucking story. What a story. What a story. I would not have expected this in a Chinese prison. I would not have expected this from the Australian government.
Yeah.
Um, I'm glad you've managed to document your story to shine light to it. I think you've got a book coming out about it as well and about your story, correct?
Yeah, well, I'm looking for somebody to help me exhibit the journal because what I really wanted to do was put it up on the wall in an art gallery somewhere. And I think the aesthetic of it is that it's really got it's a lot of there's a lot of powerful narratives in there that need to be displayed. And I think if you just went and wrote it all down in a novel, it wouldn't have the same impact. So I think the necessity of the art, the fact that it's written en masse, and the fact that it was smuggled out of a Chinese prison, which is unheard of. I really want to exhibit that as art. And then I did promise Sean Atwood that I was going to get around to writing a novel, but it's been pretty slow going. And my wife is 6 months pregnant, so we're expecting our
Well,
first
congratulations.
child in April. Thank you so much. So I don't know how much time I'll have to write a book in the coming months, but it's certainly something that I want to get my story out there and try to help the people that are left behind.
Well, Matthew, I first thank you for giving me a story for my nightmare tonight.
Yeah.
Second, thank you for making me worry every time I travel. I don't have that peace of mind that the Australian embassy will help me. And
No,
third, I
they won't,
appreciate you sharing
brother.
the story, man, and being so open about it. It's really,
Yeah, me too. Hey, and also,
really
man,
kind of you.
congratulations. Like, I've been in prison for a long time and I haven't really been up with social media. I've been trying to live my real life more after being released and spending time online. But I'm really, really happy for you, man. You seem to
Oh,
have
thank you
just
so
like
much.
found your niche and just blown up, and it's amazing. I'm so happy, and it's really
Thank you
inspirational,
so much,
man.
brother.
Keep up the good work.
No, I
Yeah.
appreciate it,
And
man.
thanks for
And
having me
I'll
on, brother. I really
we'll,
appreciate it.
we'll, we'll touch base after this. I think you should keep the fight. It's a story
Yeah.
that not many people are telling, um,
Yeah.
and I hope it leads to change. At least in the consular services, that is more plausible. I just don't think the Chinese prison system is going to
Yeah.
change because of this.
No, me neither. And that's probably not, that's for bigger men than me to tackle that. But I'll start at conscious services and try to see if we can get a win there first.
Matthew, really appreciate it, my friend. Good to meet you. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you. You too, brother. Take care. God bless you.